this video. And so that I don't depress people, myself included, I want to start with where I'm at instead of where I started. I had a couple people tell me that every time I tell the story of where I started, they get depressed because it wasn't a very good starting position. So instead of that, I'm going to start with where I'm at. And the purpose of making a video that's titled, what is the purpose of being a millionaire? Why do so many people focus on that? Why, if you search the term millionaire, there's so many articles, YouTube videos, podcasts come up that say how I became a millionaire, millionaire status, the millionaire lifestyle, that millionaire dream, when becoming a millionaire was never a goal. It was never a standard for me. It was never something I was shooting for. I actually didn't realize when it happened until a couple of years after, when I was making a video saying, which came first, $1 million in debt or $1 million in net worth? And so I want to clarify a couple of things. First, when I talk about millionaire, I'm actually meaning a net worth of over $1 million. So not how much income, not the total value of all of my assets, but the idea with net worth, and a lot of people get this almost right. They say it's assets minus liabilities. So if you had a car and it was your only asset and you didn't own a house, but your car was worth 10 grand and you owed $5,000 on it, they say assets, which the car would be an asset worth $10,000, but you owe $5,000. So assets minus liabilities, the liability is the $5,000. That person would say your net worth is $5,000. But what about the cost of selling the asset? What about any tax implications that come in? So when it comes to not just a car, as a simple example to show you that you can have a positive net worth, even if you have a debt on the item, like the $5,000 you owed on the car, the net worth would still be the $5,000 that's positive above that. It's the same way with real estate. So I want to talk about what is net worth in real estate. What is net worth in stocks? What is net worth if you own a business? If you go to sell a business, what is the cost of that? If you go to sell stocks, what is the transactional cost of each transaction it takes to offload those stocks? What are the tax implications? And then what is left needs to be worth more than $1 million for me to consider somebody to be a millionaire. So current position, and then I'll cover where I started from. The current position is why a millionaire status is very important is, what does it get you, right? There are some people who say, well, I just want $1 million because $1 million sounds like a big number. But there are people who know that if they had $1 million, literally just had $1 million in their account, that they could take that money and put it to work. For the last 3 decades, it would take some type of investing to put that money to work. But currently in this higher interest rate environment, not as high as it was in the 80s or 90s when we can get 11% on a savings account in a bank. But now you can get 4 or 5% by just putting that money in a savings account, which is putting it to work. Not the method I suggest, but that's one you could do. You could just put the money in an account where it returns money. So if you have $1 million and you put it in a savings account where they're paying you 4% on that $1 million, you're going to get $40,000 a year in income from that million. So that's why a lot of people think, I want to be a millionaire because I can put the money to work. Well, that's the goal for me, is to have money working. And the current position is I chose to invest in real estate instead of stocks or running a business. There's a couple of reasons. My goal with the millionaire status is the same as the person who thinks if I had $1 million, I could put it to work. Because what does that give you? If you live on less than $40,000 a year and you can have $40,000 a year coming in that you don't have to work for, it gives you time freedom. Most of us, the majority of people, don't have time freedom. If you don't go to work, you don't eat. If you don't go to work, you lose your place you live in. And yes, we have some safety nets in place with Social Security, with welfare, food stamps, child daycare subsidies. There's a few others I'm missing there. But most of us are working so that we can have a place to live, and are working so that we can have food and travel and entertainment and all the things that come with that income. But it takes a lot of time to work, right? 32 to 60 hours a week for the average person, somewhere in there. And then the commute to work, the prepping for work, the work that we do outside of our hours that we're dedicating to the employer, where we're on the clock. Yes, I see you. If you're that person, don't do that. But if you can figure out how to have the money coming in or have that millionaire status so that you don't have to work, you get time freedom. You don't have to commute to work. You don't have to prepare for work. You're not exhausted after a day of work. So you can actually spend your time doing something you enjoy. You get all that time freedom back. So I get the point of people wanting to be millionaires because of what happens if you have that status. To me, it wasn't a net worth that mattered. It was cash flow. Cash flow set me free. So if I started and ran a business, I'm not an entrepreneur. I am not very, I worked at a truck driving school, and I think I grew the school because it belonged to someone else, and I wanted to repay them for the opportunity that they gave me. If it had been my own school, I don't think I would have grown it as much as I did. An example is what I did with real estate. There are people like Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, or Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, or Millennial Mike, who want to have large portfolios and want to invest. I didn't. My goal wasn't a large portfolio. It was time freedom, which to me was this equation: the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. Almost like it's a mantra for me. So I invested in real estate because starting and growing a business is to me working more than working for an employer. And instead of having one boss or one chain of command, everybody with a Yelp account is your boss. And so I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm an investor. And second, when it came to stocks, I didn't choose stocks as an investing strategy, which is a viable strategy that a lot of people use and use it successfully. But I didn't use it because, I'll talk about my starting position in a minute, but I didn't have a lot of money to invest. And I wanted to reach financial freedom in less than 10 years. And using something like the 4% rule, if you need that $40,000 a year, you need to invest $1 million or have $1 million invested for 4% of that to be the 40,000 that you need to live on. And 40,000 is just a number I picked. With real estate, instead of investing $1 million over a period of a decade, I invested $320,000 from my own income to produce last year a little over $203,000 in profit. So multiples of the 40,000 that it would probably take me to live. I live on less than that because I'm still house hacking. But because of the reduced amount that we need to invest, I chose real estate. If you're making more money or have a better starting position, stocks or growing a business might be the better option for you. But for me, it was buy and hold rentals. Here's what it's turned into after a little over a decade of investing. I own 8 properties. I invest in small multifamily. So I only have one single family house. So those people that think landlords are taking all of the homes off of the market and increasing values, I'm not competing with homeowners. I own one single family house that I bought more than a decade before I decided to become an investor. It was not an investment purchase. It was a home to live in purchase. So I own that one. The rest have been small multifamily, which is up to 4 units, duplexes, triplex, fourplex, all put together. Those 8 properties give me a total of 18 rental units. And last year, those 18 units produced what I call pure cash flow, which means you have money that comes in from rents. Now, sometimes that's rents from places you rent out. Sometimes it's parking spaces. It can be storage facilities. It can be an RV. But my properties produced enough money to where, after paying principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, so your expenses with your mortgages, and setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, there was $203,000 of income from my rental properties. More than I needed to live by about 4, at least 4, maybe even 5. So I retired last year. That's my current position. The net worth, the idea with net worth is total value of your assets. And I only own real estate. I don't invest in stocks, no crypto. I don't own businesses. I just own real estate. So because of that, I've had to diversify in 2 very specific ways to protect my assets. Instead of diversifying in several asset classes and making it harder to become wealthy, it would have taken me longer, because the more you diversify in investing in the beginning, the harder it is to master any one of those asset types. Instead, I picked one asset type and mastered that one. Once you're wealthy, then it makes sense to diversify. But as I was investing, I diversified in 2 specific ways. But the total value of the properties of those 8 is a little over $6.4 million now, which is a weird number for me to say, which you would think that means I'm a multimillionaire based on that, but that's not how it works. We have to do assets, that's the gross value of the assets, minus liabilities, where I have a little less than $1.8 million in debt on those properties. So this is how it's possible to have millions, almost with an S, pluralized, in debt, but have a positive net worth. If I owe 1.8, but it's worth 6.4, 6.4 minus 1.8 would give me what some people would call net worth. It doesn't. Because if you actually sell real estate or stocks or your business and walk away, you have implications like the cost of selling. In real estate, it's somewhere between 6 and 8% for agent fees and closing costs to offload properties. So I would lose the cost, the agent fees and everything would be 6 to 8% of 6.4 million. So the total gross value, that percentage would come off as well. And then, even though real estate has some awesome tax benefits, if you sell, it's not being inherited, and you're not 1031ing into another asset class, you are going to have a tax obligation as a capital gains tax if you've owned it for more than a year and there's been rentals in the property. I would save some taxes on the place that I actually physically live, as long as I live there at least 2 years out of the last 5, because of the IRS Rule 121. Would save me up to $250,000 because I'm single. If it's up to $500,000, if you're stupid, I mean married. If you're married, you get the $500,000 off of tax obligations. So you have to take the gross value, which for me is a little over 6.4, minus the debt, which is 1.8, then take away capital gains tax, which whatever it is the current year that you sell, I've seen 21%, 28% being the maximum, talking about that going up, depending on who gets elected next year. It can go up, it can go down. So you take all of that away, what's left is a little over $3 million in net worth for me. So current status, multimillionaire. I start with that so that I don't depress people. And then before I get to the point of where I started at, have a drink ready, because I'm going to have a drink ready too, because this is not fun to talk about. But in 2008, we had a housing crash, which impacted the entire market. And when you impact a market, it impacts tax revenue for cities. And in 2008, I had been a police officer about 8 years, a little less than 8 years, and got laid off at the same time as a bunch of qualified officers, because police departments don't have a lot of money, because the tax revenue from the cities is how they pay your first responders, law enforcement and firemen. And so I was laid off. My second attempt at getting a pension was taken away due to things outside of my control. So laid off from a police department. I was a single parent with 3 kids. Found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce. It was actually $313,000 in bad debt. And here's a quick tip for you. My ex had filed bankruptcy, which made our debt my debt, which is technically how it works in a community property state anyway. But I was calling the creditors to find out who the debtors were. Who did I owe the money to? I didn't even know who they were. And one of them asked me if it was my intention to file bankruptcy, like my ex did, because if I was just thinking about bankruptcy, they would take 30% of what I owed, or maybe 20%. It was some drastically reduced amount. So what did I do then? Now, I had dismissed the idea of a bankruptcy because I was thinking I was going to go back into law enforcement, which is a career killer if you have a bankruptcy on your record, right? Makes you more likely to take a bribe. But I thought about it. That's a factual statement. I thought about it and dismissed it, but I thought about bankruptcy. So I called all of the creditors and I asked them, I said, hey, I'm thinking about bankruptcy, because I didn't know about this debt, first of all. And there was actually evidence of that. It was going to a post office box I didn't know existed. There was correspondence with my ex saying, don't let me know about it, that she would handle all the bills. Like, all of the things were there to say I didn't know about this, but I intended to pay them. Almost everybody took that 20 or 30% of that debt. So if you have massive amounts of debt and you're even thinking about bankruptcy, contact your creditors and say, I'm thinking about bankruptcy. Is there a reduced amount that you would accept that I will commit to pay? And it took the $313,000 down to $89,000 that I was actually responsible for. After getting laid off from law enforcement, I ended up finding a job at a truck driving school where I started at $17 an hour. So single parent, 3 kids, $89,000 in debt, $17 an hour. Not a great starting position. So the water is strong today. So the goal is, from that starting position, how did I reach millionaire status in about a decade? I want to say net worth changed again because I just purchased another property, but it really hasn't changed yet. It hasn't gone up or down with this purchase, and I'll explain that too before the video's over. Did I have $320,000 to invest? No. That's the amount that I invested from my own income over the next 10 years. But it took 10 years. That's the missing element that a lot of people miss, is that time. It took the decision to reach financial freedom and knowing that it was going to take time. There is a big mindset with people of, I want to win the lottery. I want to make more money. I want to get this promotion. I want to have get in a wreck and get an insurance settlement. Like, there's all these thoughts of how money can come quickly. The quicker money comes, the quicker it can go away. That's why 70% of people who receive a windfall, sports players, lottery winners, 70% of them file bankruptcy within 5 years. I didn't want that. I wanted wealth that would come in, that would get me time freedom, that would be very hard to actually lose. I would have to probably actively work at losing that money. Again, didn't choose to start a business, didn't want to invest in stocks because of my time horizon, my limited income, and bad debt to income ratio at the beginning. So I chose to invest in small multifamily. I moved from my house into an apartment and rented the house out because this fixed the debt to income ratio. It allowed me to get rental income on my tax returns for 2 years. And it allowed me to get 2 years of experience in this new field, which made me lendable, bankable. I could borrow money to buy mortgage, to buy properties with mortgages. I purchased a duplex and moved into one side. This took 2 years to save the money. I saved about $28,000 over those 2 years, working at the truck driving school, working overtime, growing my side hustle, which was playing World of Warcraft and selling things online. But actually I could play with my kids. So it was a hobby that kept the family together too. And I tricked them into learning how to write, because gaming back then used to be typing too. There was no voice chat. It was an evil, diabolical parenting moment, I think, but it was effective. How many of them have computer-based jobs? 2 of them. 2 of my 3 kids have computer-based jobs now. So I think it paid off. So 2 years to save the 28 grand to move into a duplex. This got me rental income on my tax returns, which answers a question that I think is in the chat about when lenders will accept past rental history towards a new mortgage. Most lenders, the majority of lenders, will say, if you have 2 years tax returns, they will start looking at 75% of rental income in your debt to income ratio. There's a couple of caveats. It can be shorter. I've seen it be 10 months or a year, as long as you also have, the majority of your leases also have at least 3 months remaining. So month-to-month tenants don't do you as much good for debt to income ratio in some cases as a longer lease does. And to solve an issue where I had a tenant who wanted to buy a house, and my goal with all my tenants, I've talked with each one of them. Every time I'm signing a lease, I say, you shouldn't be renting from me. You shouldn't be signing this lease. Let me help you buy a property. Let me help you buy a duplex like this, so you can live in one side, rent out the other, and almost live for free. And so far, I've only had one tenant take me up on that. But I wanted the long lease so that I could be bankable for the next mortgage. So what we did in that case, and they ended up buying a house. I introduced them to the agent, I introduced them to the lender, helped them find, they bought a house, not a duplex. So choices people make, but got them on the property ladder. So I feel good. They're in a better position. I have a new tenant in place. Took me less than, I think, I'm trying to think if I had a full week to even get that unit turned over. So getting them on the property ladder with that signed lease, but they were hunting for a property. And now most leases, when they're a year long, you have what's called a lease termination agreement. So some states like Washington, where I invest, you can hold somebody to the lease till the end or until you rent the unit out, right? So to alleviate the fear of the tenant, sometimes what I do is say, we're going to have a lease termination agreement that doesn't go till the end of the lease and doesn't go until I rent the unit out. It's just all of my leases have a $2,000 basically. And I make sure that this number is different than the rental amount so that the tenant doesn't think that they've paid the last month's rent, because that's also an incentive to move. But I set this at 2,000, whether the rent is 15 or 2,500, somewhere in there, but the rent and the deposit and is different. The lease termination amount is different so that it's clearly identifiable as that what this amount is. Almost all of my tenants are always right around that $2,000 mark to terminate the lease. But in the case where the tenant told me they are looking to buy a property, we put in a $50 lease termination fee. So when they closed on their house, it was $50 to break the lease. This gave me the longer lease to satisfy the lender's need to have rental income on my tax returns, and the majority of my leases having more than 3 months remaining. So that is how I got into the duplex, because the 75% of the rental income on the house and 75% of the rental income on the duplex of the other side would count on my debt to income ratio, basically making the mortgage balance up to zero, to where I've had lenders tell me after those first 2 years, that's the challenge. They have told me, you can purchase any property that you want to, as long as you save the down payment, because debt to income ratio becomes almost irrelevant. 2 years to get that first duplex, and then 2 more years to get the next one. And then things start to speed up. You can increase your income. This is key, is increasing your income at all points in time while that first few years, we're kind of required to work. I'll say often, and I say this in a lot of threads, working for money is the dumbest way to make it. That's why the rich don't work for money. It's the first rule out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm more of a fan of rule number 3, but that first rule is the rich don't work for money, because it's taxed at the highest amount. Your time is limited. It exhausts you, which makes it harder to spend your not working time working for somebody else, developing your own income. So working for money is the dumbest way to make it, but most of us have to do that for 5 to 10 years. There are some people who can do it faster if you're in a better starting position than I was. But if you have a similar starting position or similar challenges where you're not making a lot of money and you have some debt you need to take care of, whether you knew about it or not, I think 5 to 10 years, the average person can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, even if you're not starting from the best position, and make work completely optional. It's literally the goal of my channel, is to teach you that you can do that. Once things start to speed up, if you can avoid, so you've increased your income at work, you've learned new skills to be more attractive to your employer, you've developed things that make your company more money so that you can make more money, whether it's promotions, sometimes it's changing companies to go to a competitor who's willing to pay you more to take you away from their competition. But whatever you've done to increase your income, to grow these assets, for me, it was renting out the house, reducing my living expenses by living in a duplex and renting out the other side, adding the duplex. At about the 4-year mark of investing, the income snowball starts to happen. People talk about, Dave Ramsey's debt snowball of paying off small debts. So you get the dopamine hit of whenever one's closed off. For me, it was each new cash flowing asset made it easier to save for the next one. So now instead of 2 years between assets, the next one was 1.5 years. And then I made a mistake, paid off a mortgage, which took about 1 year, and then about 1 year to buy the 4-plex, and then a triplex, and the 2 more duplexes since then, bringing me up to the 18 units that I have. Buying the rental properties and saving the down payments is not as beautiful name on the super chat. I'll read that in just a second. As soon as you find out that my kids are probably not inheriting my money, you might not want to be my long lost son. So, squirrel. Saving up the $320,000, it was $28,000, including closing costs, reserves, money for immediate repairs, right? So that wasn't the full investment of that down payment. I think it was around $15,000 was the 5% down on that first duplex, which tells you roughly what the price of that one was. And then the investment on the next duplexes and the 4-plex and paying off the mortgage. That's not what made me a millionaire. What I've invested out of my own money is only about $320,000. That, newsflash, isn't $1 million, right? $320,000 invested into almost any asset class wouldn't make you a millionaire in a short amount of time until we look at what is called, now with stocks, most people understand compound interest. That's why they say if you invest in your 20s and stop, You're going to have more money when you're 60 than if you invest when you're 40s and invest 3 or 4 times as much, right? That compound interest over time is more important than investing more later, right? So most people understand stocks. I don't invest in stocks because I didn't have 30 or 40 years. I had 10 where I wanted to make work optional. Compounding sources of income is where the millionaire status comes from. If this was going to be an edited video, I would put that at the beginning, but not today. It's not an edited video. I wanted to do this in a live stream so that you can see with my terrible memory and some notes. This is how reaching millionaire status happened. I had the income from my job, which I was slowly increasing, climbing the corporate ladder. I was eventually demoted all the way down to president of the company. And I still did the side hustle because I enjoyed gaming, but the cash flowing assets from real estate and then reducing or eliminating my house hack, my cost of living with house hacking, first the duplex where I reduced it, and then my fourplex where I started getting paid to live where I do. So reducing the expenses, increasing the income, and then the cash flow from the rental slowly adding up. Even that isn't what really took me to millionaire status, because there's several ways that real estate pays you. If you saw my short recently, there's at least 4, but the first one is that cash flow. Cash flow sets us free. That's how I'm able to retire and never have to work again. But the second thing is appreciation. Now, here's the beauty of appreciation when it comes to net worth with real estate. If I invested $320,000 in stocks and it went up 10%, I gain, quick math, $32,000. Probably wrong because I'm not a math guy. But if I invest $320,000 into real estate over a decade, here's what happened to my appreciation from 2020 to 2021. I gained appreciation on the gross value of the real estate, not the amount that I had invested. So in just that 1 year, my net worth increased from just appreciation, not cash flow, and not this other way that I'm going to talk about in a second, over $600,000 in 1 year in net worth increase because of compounding sources of income. I had my job, my side hustle, cash flow, appreciation on the gross value of the real estate, not just what I've invested. That was one of the biggest factors. And when you do that every year, it starts to add up pretty quick. Then there's this other way that real estate pays you, which I consider it's like a savings account that continues to grow without me having to actively deposit money into it. Every month, tenants pay off a growing portion of my mortgages. Since there's this thing called the debt amortization, which is when you first get a mortgage, most of what you pay is interest, and there's a little bit of principal. And as it goes through, that XY axis kind of crosses in the middle to where the second half of the mortgage, you start paying a lot more of the principal and less of the interest, which is one of the things why refinancing sometimes isn't the smartest thing to do, because you start the depreciation or you start the interest amortization over again. But it can increase your cash flow. So sometimes I've done that. The tenants are paying off the mortgages, and every month the amount that they pay towards the principal becomes larger. A couple of years ago, it was about $3,000 a month that was being paid off of the principal balances on the loans. Now it's about $3,700 a month without me doing anything different of the tenants, because every month it's a couple dollars more per mortgage from each tenant paying off the debt. So every month, imagine if you had $3,000 going into an account that you didn't really have access to unless you did a HELOC, cash out refinance, or sold a property, things that I have not done, don't plan on doing, but it is exponentially getting bigger and bigger, adding to net worth. And then the last step of this, why real estate for me was the easiest, simplest. So it wasn't easy and it wasn't simple, but it was the easiest and simplest format for me to choose to reach millionaire status, reach time freedom, make work optional, eventually leave a job I actually liked to have the time freedom, because that won out over the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Time freedom to me was at the top. Tax benefits. I talked about having $203,000 in pure profit last year in 2022. And recently, I have a brother-in-law who's working towards a pension, has reached the point where he's going to get a pension, thinks I'm stupid for investing. And when I just kind of casually mentioned in conversation that I made $203,000 in profit last year, he said, well, that must really suck, because out of that, you got to pay for repairs and then you got to pay taxes. And what do you got left? I'm like, okay, Debbie Downer, but let's talk about what profit is. When I retired, I had 16 rental units that produced a little over $17,000 a month in cash flow. That's cash flow. That means after setting aside for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, so the mortgage is paid, and then setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, I do 15% of gross rents being set aside. After that 15% is set aside, I had the 17,000. And because of depreciation and write-offs, in a decade, legally, I've never paid a penny in rental income tax. Still. Another one of the reasons why I did purchase another property this year, as you know, it's my third house hack, so I haven't always house hacked over and over and over. I've only done it 3 times. Is this starts a whole new depreciation schedule on another property. It's a duplex, so it's 50% while I'm living here. Right? Talk to your CPA on how all that works. I don't even want to know. I just know that because of hiring a good CPA and investing in an asset class that most of the people who work in Congress have, and keep making laws that benefit people who own real estate. It's so weird how that works. It'll be probably another 5, 10, 15 years before I have to pay any income tax on rental income. And at that point, I will have properties purchased with debt from the 2020s, getting rents in the 2030s. I'll happily pay taxes when there's so much money coming in that I eventually finally have to run out depreciation schedules, have paid off mortgages, and there will be such a massive gap between what my income is and what my write-offs and depreciation is, that I will be writing a check to the government. And it will suck, because I will be probably a decamillionaire by the time that happens. There's the timeline. I'm going from broke to millionaire, which my goal was 10 minutes, and we're at 34. So it's a good thing I'm not paid by my time. If this is your first time to one of my live streams, thank you for joining me. My name is Dion. I do these talks to try to help you reach financial freedom. And the goal is to answer any financial freedom, financial independence, sometimes explaining what the differences are, but those two, with a focus on real estate, but not only on real estate. I have friends who invest in stocks. I have friends who have played in crypto. They would not like that word. They would say they invest in crypto, but I think they play. One of them, a really good friend of mine, has actually switched over to now house hacking and doing midterm rentals and is killing it. So I don't know. I should ask them how their crypto investing is doing. I have friends who invest in real estate with buy and hold. I have people who do flipping. I know a couple of wholesalers. I've never done a deal with them yet because I haven't found the right deal. But I have friends who use property management, invest at a distance, self-manage, do their own rehabs. And my goal is to take my knowledge base gained from my own experience and from my friends that also invest in real estate in different ways, and share with you some of the simple strategies that can make your investing journey easier. It isn't going to be easy, but we can make it easier. And that first 30 minutes will be chopped out into its own video about a year from now. I see a couple of super chats here. Let me see the first one from Adam. Howdy, Adam. Thank you. I had a great time on the cruise. I'm glad to be back for the good Wi-Fi. And Adam, just so, yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. If anybody takes a cruise, don't pay for the Wi-Fi package. It's almost not worth it. Just download everything you need. When you're on it, especially if you do anything like YouTube, they block YouTube, Netflix, most streaming services while you're on the ship. So what was the point of paying for it? I would say don't pay for the drink package, but that's stupid. Dion's long lost son. Howdy. Thank you for the super chat. This question is scenario specific, but how do you determine when to grow, take leverage versus pay off debt? I'm trying to decide if I should lever up and use a HELOC for new property, cash flow, great. Don't know if I have an appetite for it. So that is a great question. I appreciate it. I mentioned during the intro, if you remember, I paid off a mortgage and I think it was a mistake. About a week ago, I think I released a video where I did it while I was on the ship, I think. Paying off a mortgage was a mistake. I don't regret it, right? So there are mistakes we regret. And yeah. Haven't drank it enough to talk about any of those yet. But then there's other mistakes where you're like, oh yeah, I could have done that better. I could have done it differently. We don't really regret it. Paying off the mortgage isn't something that I think anybody would regret. Having a paid off property does have some psychological effect. It doesn't have an actual financial impact. If you pay off debt or use the same amount of money to acquire a levered property, your equity position is the same. Pay off $100,000 to have a paid off property or invest $100,000 into a property. You own $100,000 of real estate. The difference is this new $100,000 invested into the new property starts a new depreciation schedule, more tax benefits. You're going to now gain appreciation on 4 times what you invested if you put a 25% down payment in, instead of gaining appreciation on just what you've paid off. And there's a couple of reasons where paying off the debt to me doesn't make as much sense. If the interest rate was really high, or if it had something dumb, like don't do this, an adjustable rate mortgage, sure, pay that off faster. But if it has fixed rate debt and it's cash flowing, saving and investing the money on the next property to me makes more sense. So that was my version of pay it off or not. And I chose to pay it off. There's a couple of mitigating factors. When I did that, you were allowed to have 4 mortgages in your name. I wasn't educated on DSCR, asset-based, seller financing, like all these other options that I now know about. So I paid off the 4th one and then added a 4th one and was going to just rinse and repeat that. And then they raised the number that you can have to 10. Got to 6, reached financial freedom, and will slowly add real estate as I need it. And not because I need the real estate, but because I have the cash I need to deploy. It's a terrible problem. Can't wait for you to have the same problem. But your question is a little more scenario specific. I want to know if I should lever up, use a HELOC. So whenever someone says lever up, and this is not an attack on you, I really appreciate the super chat. I'm trying to help you. When somebody says, how do I tap my equity? How do I use my equity? How do I recycle capital? Let's rephrase that. If you have the ability to take out a home equity line of credit, means that you have the ability to add debt to an existing asset. So if you're going to acquire something with that HELOC, that's the first thing the mind focuses on. But the thing you're missing is when you add the HELOC, you're increasing the cost of that first asset, or you're reducing the cash flow of that asset if it's something on like a HELOC on a house hack, or I call them RELOCs, but a rental equity line of credit, right? A line of credit on a rental property. You're going to increase your cost or reduce that cash flow first. That's the first impact. Then you're going to put the money to work on a new property. Will that property produce enough of a return to justify the investment in that property and the added debt to the first asset? So now you have a couple of choices. So do you have a deal that's good enough to do that? That's the first question. Is there a deal that you know with confidence? So I don't recommend emptying out your 401k or taking a loan against retirement accounts, or you taking a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance or selling for 1031 on your first couple of deals, because that tends to be when we make our largest mistakes. Your biggest mistakes are going to happen on those first ones before you have your investing legs underneath you, right? You're going to mess up your calculated yield, rehab time, estimated cost, closing costs, like all these things you have to learn. How to find a lease, screen in place, and keep a tenant, like all of those things. Once you've learned that and you have 2 or 3 deals done and you have confidence in your ability to get the return that you expect, and you found a deal, now a HELOC, cash out refinance, a sale for a 1031 could make sense. And now we'll go through the logic chain on which one of those I would choose. Home equity lines of credit have a couple of bonuses and then a couple of negatives. The first one is you only pay interest on the amount that you actually take out and use. So that's a bonus. A negative is whatever amount you could take out, 1% of that hits your debt to income ratio. So if you don't have rentals with 2 years of income on tax returns yet, and you take out a home equity line of credit and you could take out $100,000, they just assume that you have $1,000 a month payment in your debt to income ratio. So 1% of 100,000 is 1,000 a month. So it's a hit to your home equity line of credit, to your debt to income ratio. A bonus for the HELOC is as you take out money and you pay it down, you can reuse it like a credit card, right? So it's a revolving form of credit. That's a bonus. The negative on the HELOC is banks can cancel it at any time, do something outside of your control that you might not ever understand or even have the reasoning for. 2021, Wells Fargo canceled all lines of credit. They didn't attack home equity lines of credit, but they canceled lines of credit. Doesn't mean you instantly have to pay back everything you owe. It just means you can't access any more of what was available, which then turns, and here's an example from Matt, the lumberjack landlord. He had a $75,000 home equity line of credit. He had borrowed $25,000. So he had $50,000 left. So he was using 1/3 of that line of credit, which gave me 33% credit utilization amount. They canceled the home equity line of credit, so he loses the access to the other 50. He just keeps making the payments on the 25,000 like normal, so that's not bad. But now that line of credit is at 100% credit utilization, which can have a massive impact to your credit score. So that's the positives and negatives with the HELOC. But the thing that determines HELOC or refinance to me is home equity lines of credit have a fixed rate debt for a period of time, 5, 10, whatever number of years. The home equity line of credit that you're looking at, can you pay it off with your cash flow and confidently know that you can pay it off before the rate adjusts? If you can, then the home equity line of credit makes sense if you have a deal that's good enough and you can pay it off before the rate adjusts. The cash out refinance is an option if you don't think you can pay the HELOC off in time. So the cash out refinance, there's a couple options there. If you have a high interest mortgage and interest rates are lower and you do a cash out refinance, you can actually bring down the payment on the debt that you already have. Last 10, 15 years, that's the way it was. In 2020, I did refinances without pulling money out just to get the better interest rate. In the last year, rates have doubled or close to tripled now. So that's probably not the case. So the money that you owe on the property now, you don't want to touch, because if you refinance that portion, you're going to be doubling or tripling the current interest rate. So instead of a cash out refinance, new mortgage, I would do a second mortgage, which is going to have a slightly higher interest rate because they're in second position. There are lenders who will do this, but it leaves the original mortgage alone at the current interest rate. Then you have that second mortgage, which is enough fixed rate debt. You can use it to buy that asset. Again, same question. Do you have an asset that will justify the purchase of the asset, creating a return that's good enough to add to cover the additional debt to the existing asset? And then we go to the third thing of maybe you could sell and do a 1031 exchange. So that's the cool thing about investing. As long as you sell an asset and purchase a similar asset, so same asset type, then you can, you don't not pay the taxes, you delay the taxes. You could not pay them if you do this until you die. So everybody says death and taxes is guaranteed, but there's in real estate, there's ways to avoid taxes to beyond death. But you move the tax obligation to the next property, and it has a very strict timeline. So make sure you research 1031 before you do that. Can you find a deal where the return is good enough to justify the actual loss of the first asset, using a 1031 to delay the taxes, purchase the new asset, increase your cash flow, get a better return? My question that I start, there's another question that happens before all of those if you're going to sell something. Before you would sell something to buy another asset class, even if the return was good enough, I want you to ask yourself this question. You purchased the thing you're going to sell in the past, that's why you already own it, for a certain price and with a certain interest rate. Let's say it was a duplex you purchased in 2018 for $300,000. You refinanced in 2020 to a 3% mortgage. I'm using that as an example because that's exactly what I did with one of my duplexes. So 300,000, 2018, refinance. So now I have that debt. Currently today, in my market where duplexes cost $600,000 to $900,000, would I buy one for $300,000? Yes. Would I buy one at 3% interest rate? Yes. Why would I sell something I would currently pounce on? So that's what I would do before I sold something is, would I buy that asset now? And did I find a deal that's good enough? I hope that helps you make your choice. Don't do it on the first couple. Know that you're adding debt to an asset. Then pick the best format, whether it's HELOC, refi, or sale, and let me know how it goes. Because this is a quote that I actually use every time I reference I paid off that mortgage and it was a mistake. There's a quote from my daughter. She was a teenager at the time. She turned into a lovely young woman, but it every now and then as a teenager, she had nanoseconds of genius. And this is one of the things she said that's always stuck with me. She said, I was actually talking to a teenager because that's where you should get all of your information. Should I pay off the house or should I buy another rental? I wasn't sure how to do this or which way I should go. She said, it's really hard to make a decision when both outcomes are positive. You own a property, you have a large chunk of equity in, which means it's probably a better payment than you can get if you purchased another one like it now. It's probably better cash flow than if you purchase something like it now. And you're choosing what to do with it. Both outcomes are going to be positive. It's not going to be an easy choice. Thank you for the question. It's appreciated. Before I go to these, there was a question from Bill that came in an email on two things. First is late fees. Late fees, when I first started, I made all of these mistakes. I've talked about this before. My very first tenant, it was actually a friend of mine, still a friend of mine, because this was all my fault, not his. I rented to a friend, my first property because, who can trust a stranger when we're starting out? That's the mistake we make. Strangers will stick to a lease, usually better than friends or family will. I didn't even have a lease, rented with a handshake. And when the rent was late, I figured, well, I'm a single parent. This is, I'm kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And there's been studies where 50% of people making more than $150,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. So poor or rich, that's still a thing, no matter who you are. And to me at the time, $150,000 a year, I would have called rich. Most of my working years, I don't think I ever made more than $50,000 until the last couple. But late rent became never rent. Right? You set the theme, Bill, when you let rent come in late. You tell the tenant, of your hierarchy of bills, your landlord is the one that you should push on. Your cell phone can cancel your service. Your internet can cancel your service. Your power can be shut off, right? You have all of these bills. Your car can be repossessed. But if you call your landlord and they've got this big soft heart and you say, hey, I've got this life event going on. Can I pay my rent late? And you let them, which I did, it can become never. When I finally went to the house to talk to him, he didn't even live there. He had moved out and rented the house to someone else. Again, I set that up. I made that happen. Cheers. Emotional therapy. Bill. Been having, okay. And then the second thing is the hemline question. So I'm going to talk about that too. But so when it comes to late fees, I have learned, and I have this as an educational conversation with my tenants before it comes up. So I do this at lease signing, or anytime I'm interacting with tenants, I'll talk about other tenants and just make this a conversational topic. I will say, since there are programs like Section 8, landlords can be audited, right? You get your home inspected, you get all these things. I need to be universal with all of my tenants and treat everyone the same. So I understand if you have a life event, you might have to pay your rent late. We have a lease agreement that says this is a potentiality. In the lease agreement, here's how my late fees work. Bill, you can set yours up however you want. But mine is $20 a day, starting on the day that they're late. So if it's due on the 1st, there's a 5-day grace period. So on the 6th, it starts $20 a day. I have some tenants who are paid at different times of the month, have set incomes. So one's rent is due on the 8th or whatever. So it's after the grace period, after the due date. And you can set your leases up where it works for you and the tenant. So I'm sorry, but the late fees are going to happen. And yes, if a tenant called and said, hey, like my spouse just died or my kid's in a car wreck or whatever, I'm going to pay the rent late. Yeah, you can waive the fees. You can be human. You can have, logic and go case by case on this. But during this conversation, I say, we just have to go by the late fees. That's how it works. So if you need to pay it late, you can. And then I have the math of time conversation. I explain to the tenant, and this is the conversation that I think has been the reason why I've never had a late or missing rent payment since I put these systems in place and had these conversations. I explained to the tenant, I said, I don't know if you've ever thought about this way before, but most tenants have about 4 weeks to get the rent together for next month. So right now you're having an event and if the person wants to pay their rent late, and I want to be super nice and I say, yeah, let's go a week late, you'll be fine. So you get another week to get your rent together this month, makes things better. But what I'm doing then is setting you up for failure and probably going to have to evict you because next month you now only have 3 weeks to get your rent together. What are the odds it's going to get easier with this event to get your rent together in 3 weeks when every month you've had 4 and it's not always been easy? Let them process that. And then I finish this up with, I, as a favor, and I love the hate that I get when I say this in the short videos, is as a favor to the tenant, the day that the rent is late. So if it's due on the 1st, the 5-day grace period on the 6th, not only do your late fees start, I'm going to serve you with eviction papers to help you out. There are rental assistance programs out there that will help people when they have a life event pay their rent. But most of them won't talk to you until you're holding eviction papers in your hand. So that's how this process is going to go. You can pay late. There is a lease in place that says you are allowed to do this. Here's how the late fees work. Here's how the math of time works. And here's how the eviction process would work. Now that person sits back and goes, okay, so I've got all these bills. Which ones? Okay, I might cut out a streaming service. I might cut out eating out this week because of this life event or whatever to focus and make sure that they know that the place that they live might also be important to pay. So, and then Bill, your other question here, having trouble getting the Hemlane discount. They already have a 20% if you pay for it yearly. When I called to talk, they have no clue about the Dion Talk code. So I've had that issue before. I'm using Hemlane on 3 of my properties. I might use it on this one once the rehab's done. We'll see. But I'll step up tiers when I travel if I need to have somebody go sign a lease or something. So I like the flexibility of Hemlane. Matt doesn't like them because if you have 50 or 100 rental units, I guess the tax information, which I don't use, I have a spreadsheet for all my taxes because again, 16 units versus he has 137. That's a lot more than me. He needed to look at the back end of the thing, which I don't care about. But the Hemlane, if you use the code Dion Talk, you're supposed to get the 20% off your first year, however it works. I don't know that it stacks when they have that current deal, whatever they run the deal of, you can get 20% off too. So it not going to get you 40% off. But I'm going to send a screenshot of your email to Dana every now and then, about once a month or so. I do videos with Dana, the CEO of Hemlane, and I'll say, hey, look, your guys' code's not working. So I appreciate you trying to use the Dion Talk thing to get the 20% off when they don't have their standard deal going. But if Dion Talk ever doesn't work, they should know one rental at a time or Zuber as the other code. So one of those should work. We're both, what do you call it? Not sponsored by, but affiliates of Hemlane. And again, I'm using it. I didn't go to all of my 16 units and say, hey, you guys all have to learn this new platform. I literally have like this nice lady who writes out 6 months worth of checks and gives them to me, has a flip phone, doesn't have the internet in her house. I'm not going to make her get the internet, learn a new platform and use a portal, right? But as I'm adding new units or having tenant turnover, the new tenants are going to be on Hemlane. Cool. Howdy, everybody. Simply Z, I think I answered your question. Hello, Futureland. Bill O'Connell, no, I'm unsure if I want to use Hemlane because of this. I don't think I would hold that against them. I think their system on affiliates is probably not good, but I'm having pretty good experience with their collecting rents and dispatching handyman system. Wealth building journey, howdy. Lumberjack landlord tries door loop. There you go. And Wealth Building Journey has news. Long story short, God bless America. And inspection reports. Wealth Building Journey, Chester, is under contract on his place, had the inspection earlier today. So I look forward to it. I'm probably going to reach out and make a video together, get you on here and do a video on how that went. Dividend Dave, howdy, you made it too. Frank, Josh, it's going to be weird meeting some of you goofballs in Vegas. I believe that's true. I think it shocks everybody that I'm actually 4'2". It freaks people out the first time they meet me. All-nighter hider, howdy. Laura, howdy. Good to see you here. All-nighter hider, stimulate that like button. Thank you. And if you don't like my content, make sure you hit the dislike button. Hit it twice so I know you were sure. Jada, howdy. I'm really close to buying my first property in the next couple of months, but recently got back into music. Should I just go light on music and mainly keep focusing on saving for real estate? I see music as another piece of passive income, but takes a lot of work to build to get to that point. Should I just focus on one asset class at a time? That's a good question. So if music had an expense and saving for real estate had an expense, it'd probably be a little easier to figure out which one was going to have the better return and then make sure you focused your savings on that investment. When it comes to time, I think you can do both. So maybe I haven't been very clear on this too. So that's a great question because it's going to help me take the few seconds it actually takes to put these thoughts into articulable words to hopefully convey this thought. When I say, like my course, if you go to diontalk.com, it's financial freedom for the lazy person, right? So lazy, I actually mean busy, right? I was learning how to teach at a CDL school. So I learned all of the different formats of teaching, how to make things retainable, presented in different formats for people who have different learning styles, learned how to take concepts for truck driving and turn them into teachable moments, which I'm doing with real estate now. So like I've learned a skill and I'm using it here too. the amount of time it takes to learn that skill, the amount of time it takes to learn real estate or to learn what you're doing with music. Learning a skill takes a lot more time than using a skill. That should be a t-shirt. In the beginning, when you start with real estate, there's a lot to learn. Studying a market, choosing a strategy, adjusting your strategy based on the market, following trends, tracking interest rates, seeing what's happening with rents. Like all of these things you have to learn. But once you have the basics down, you hunt for a deal, 10 to 20 minutes a day. You make 2 or 3 offers a week, a couple of emails with your agent. You get excited and nervous when an offer either gets looked at or accepted or rejected. Like Chester just dealt with going under contract. The first fear we have is I'm making an offer. I'm afraid they might not take it. Then the fear is they might take it. And now I have to pay for an inspection and an appraisal and actually commit to this. And now he's under contract. And there's, it's like the fear is constantly there through this whole process, but it keeps shifting the form that it takes. So with real estate, you have to live somewhere. Can you save for your down payment, which if you're doing things with music, hopefully you're doing something that would increase your income, right? If you're developing this passion, if it's a passion that doesn't develop income, kind of like, I don't have a problem with people going to college. I think if you go to college to increase income, great. But if you're going to go to college for something that doesn't increase income, but has a big expense, I think people should reach financial freedom, use the income from financial freedom to pay for the college experience to learn the thing that isn't going to generate more income, instead of going to college for the experience, learning the thing that isn't going to increase income, and developing a bunch of debt that's going to make financial freedom harder. Right? Like there's a chronology to choosing when to go to college. So it's not that I have a problem with college. It's that I think that there's a way to think about it. So with the music, if it's going to produce income and you can focus on it now, you can do that while you're saving for a house hack. Buy a house with an ADU, or buy a single family house that you live in for a year. And then in a year or two, buy another one, move and rent out the first one. Like even if you don't want a shared living space or shared property with somebody, whatever the reason why you think you can't house hack, there's a version you can fall under. That's saving for a year or two that takes no action, no time commitment while you focus on music, but you are constantly, consistently still saving for that first purchase. And then in 2 years, while music is, you're learning the skill or developing the skill, you buy a property and you have a few things to learn now. How do you collect rents? Where do you get your lease from? How do you, and putting all of these things, putting a property up on Apartments or Zillow or Hemline, it takes 20 minutes. And the reason I use Hemline is it puts it on 30 platforms, but you can go to apartments.com, Zillow, Realtor, any way that you can rent out a property, put it on there. Tenants pay for a credit check, background check, eviction process. You don't even have to know how to do any of that. The platform does it for you and gives you the results. Finding tenants is actually not that difficult. So then you have 1 or 2 tenants to take care of for another couple of years while you save. So 4 years where you're focusing on music, but looking at adding 1 rental every couple of years isn't like some people who they just quit their job and they start hunting down, doing mailers, doing driving for dollars, looking at county tax records, trying to develop relationships with owners, doing the Cody and Christian multifamily strategy of growing a massive portfolio that takes a lot of time, energy, and effort in the beginning, and then will set them up as deca-millionaires to do whatever they want for the rest of their life. There's other paths. Mine's the lazy investor. That reminds me, I hardly ever talk about this. It's probably why I should do this more. My course is in Financial Freedom for the Lazy Investor. You can find it at diontalk.com. Maybe somebody could put a link in the chat. But for the rest of this month till the end of September, I'm taking $100 off the course, and for the entire month of October, every Saturday at, I think it's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific, we're going to do an hour Zoom where everybody in the course can jump in. We'll look at specific portfolio issues going on for the entire month of October. Yeah, there you go. Commercial. Sorry. I try not to do that very often. So Jada, I can't tell you which way to go. I can tell you that there might be a way to do both. And I think I would need more information on what focusing on music actually means. I have we'll call him a friend. I met him here in social media world, but now we meet every month pretty much at the Tacoma FI meetup. He was a music teacher, and he might even still be a music teacher. Not sure, but that doesn't pay a lot, right? like it pays decent, but it doesn't pay a lot. So he did some house flipping, or not house flipping, couch flipping, and then he's on his second house hack now. Him and I think his fiance are doing great with that. The idea being, and this is what I see from a distance, he's not told me this, I just think this is what he's doing, is he's going to grow a rental portfolio with some versions of house hacking over the years and invest in real estate to get the cash flow coming in so that he can teach music, the thing that he loves with passion, and not worry about the income. Richard, howdy. Miguel, howdy. Now that you've passed the net worth of 1 million and you were driving crappy cars before in your journey of investing, what car were you happy to own? You did mention a Corvette. So that's a good question. I invested for 8 years before I started doing the life creep thing, right? So if you can avoid the life creep for the first 5 years, the next 5 years are amazing. Started with Ford Raptor, looks good, tons of power, not happy with it. Corvette, live in Washington, rains too much. Tundra truck, the most comfortable vehicle. I'm probably going to go Tundra again on my next pickup purchase, but it'll be probably 2 or 3 years from now. And I'll probably go with a hybrid. I like the new, wasn't a Tundra, it was another Toyota hybrid pickup. I forget what it was, but it looked really nice. The compensator, the jacked up F-250. And when I went to retire, I went to one of the most common vehicles from the Millionaire Next Door book that most millionaires have, the Ford F-150 Super Cab. So it's got plenty of room, it's comfortable, has all the extras I'm looking for, and it could do things like I'm going to do tomorrow. It's going to haul a stove to a rental unit. And this is partly because I actually want to go to the rental unit for something else. Normally I would have a handyman do this, but there you go. The lazy way. I wanted the Tesla truck, right? I'm not sure if I want to go full electric because I live in Washington and there's not a lot of charging stations. We'll see. I just like the look of the Tesla truck. I like weird things like that. We will see. Which one did I like? I test drove the Hellcat, decided not to get it. Mostly because it looked like a car. I don't like things that look like a car, like 4 doors, very vanilla. I like pickups. I like the FJ. I had an FJ for a while. That was, I like that. Not real practical if you're going to do rentals, right? Even though it opens up like an egg, there's not really any way to haul anything. I think on some days I felt like I fit more in the Corvette than I could in the FJ. Roman, howdy. Talk about the investment environment when you started 3 or 4 years ago. Any Joe Blow would be successful. It seems times are real tough now to start in real estate investing. That's a good question. And that is what I've heard since 1970. In the 1970s, people are like, oh, it used to be so easy to buy a real estate. There was only 15-year mortgages, so people could only pay so much. Now there's 30-year mortgages, and look what happened to the prices. There used to only be 1 income households. Now there's 2. And I don't know why I sound like a news reporter from the 50s all of a sudden. But the back in my day, and then in the 80s, interest rates spiked. In the 86 or 87, tax change for professionals. 90s, we had Y2K, and then we had the dot-com crash, and then the housing crash, and then in 2013 prices went above 2008, so they're unsustainable. And then 2015 we were going to have a silver tsunami, and all the boomers were going to retire. And then 2018 interest rates went above 6%. 2020 we have a pandemic. 2021 we have forbearance ending. 2022. Every time you turn around, there's a reason why right now is a terrible time to invest. You're never going to have a year where everybody says right now is when you should invest. You'll have some dummies who say you better hurry and invest, and you'll have some dumber dummies, because the dumbing continues, and I'm disappointed in my own grammar on that one, but they'll say wait for the crash. So either one of those I think is a mistake. There's 2 things that tell you when to buy. First is, are you ready? Right? So what you can be doing right now, Roman, whether it was 2018, 2020, because let me tell you, more than half my portfolio was purchased after 2020, right? I just found one of my best deals on the MLS and closed in July of this year because something shifted that's now made it easier to identify a motivated seller, something I wasn't able to do for a decade. I'm not saying it's easier, right? It's never going to be easy to find the right deals. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Like, that's a factual statement. But when anyone can be successful, there were a lot of people who lost their properties, right? Because of the bad debt structure from 2008. So one thing that improved, remember 2010 to 2014, almost nobody would buy real estate. Lenders had vanished. People were not trusting the asset class. The double dip crash was thrown around constantly. And then since then, there's been a reason. Go check out Reventure Consulting. Every 2 days, he comes out with an absolutely brand new, brilliant, charted out reason why a 40% real estate crash is 2 weeks away. When the largest real estate crash we've ever seen as a country in a 1 year period was 8.9%. It blows me away that people keep watching videos that talk about things that haven't happened and constantly any reason why it's going to happen. But I get it, fear sells. So for the last 3 to 4 years, here's what shifted. So thank you, Roman, for a good question, because I've said this in a couple of other videos and I probably should make a video. No, I think I did make a video. What shifted in the market? Here's how, when almost anybody could be successful. We had prices trending up and interest rates trending down. So flippers and wholesalers did really well. If you messed up and held something longer, the market corrected your mistake. So flipping was really easy. I think flipping is more challenging now. I'm not a flipper, so I'm not going to say it's not going to work. I'm just going to say it'd be harder to do now for me. But somebody who's been flipping for 10 years, has their skills dialed in, I don't think they're going to have a challenge. Starting right now might be a little bit more hard. Is that word? Is that how words work? A bit harder. So we had a not quite buyer's market. We had a buyer's market 2011, 12, 13, right? Because prices had crashed, lenders were gone, demand had gone, selling was difficult. But in the last 10 years now, we've had a balanced market shifting to a seller's market. So what we needed to do, this is how I got my deals between 2015, 2020. Speed. Speed was your friend. A seller was going to put a property on the MLS, and then within 3 or 4 days, they were going to get dozens of offers, over asking, waiving contingencies, offering to name their kids after the seller, whatever it would take to get their attention. So my goal was to get an offer in within hours of the property hitting the MLS, right? So I had several agents with auto searches set up so that I would get it quickly. Eventually, over 2 or 3 weeks, most agents would send me the deals, but when the first couple of days, it took several auto searches set up. So my agent and my lenders knew that they had about 1, maybe 2 hours. If it was 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, I'd give them 2 hours to get me this letter of pre-qualification and the docu-signed offer ready to be submitted. If not, I'd go to the next agent, next lender. And because I wanted it in quick, I wanted the offer in so I can get the sunk cost theory with the seller. If they got my offer fast, because they might not have expected to get their offer, they're listing for 2 or 3 times what they paid for it 20 years ago. They can't believe what their agent says they're going to get. And then they got an offer. If they accept my offer, they're more likely to not take a higher offer. Or if I get my offer in quick and then a better offer comes in and then it gets accepted, most investors and home buyers would then go away. I would say, and this is how I got half my portfolio, I would say, okay, great. Thank you. Congratulations on your better offer. But I would like my offer to sit in second position in case their offer falls through. Funding, they negotiate too hard, or the buyer backs out. My offer stands as it is. Half my portfolio, they came back and said, well, we accept your offer because that one fell through. Instead of relisting, going through, getting a bunch of other offers, right? You get the sunk cost theory they've already dealt with you. That's what worked for the time before recently, last couple of years. Now, with interest rates trending up instead of down, and home prices still trending up, they're up year over year. So all the crash bros are still wrong, even though you can watch another video saying why it's going to be 40% in the next 2 months, because transactions go down in winter every single year. So they'll be able to say year over year, look at this decrease, but they're up currently year over year. Squirrel. Where was I? So what's happening now? Speed is no longer your friend. What I'm doing now and how I got this deal is, instead of making offers quick, this is what's going to make this not easy for you, Roman, but easier than it has to be, is now instead of making offers quickly, and in that period of time, we could never know or tell if we had a motivated seller, right? Somebody that has to sell, death, divorce, birth, change of jobs, move, whatever the reason is that they have to sell. You just made an offer and it got accepted. So that was somebody who thought that's enough motivation. That price is enough motivation for me to sell. Now what we're looking for is the person who has to sell. Interest rates have over doubled. Transactions are crashing. We, on an average year, will do more than 6 million transactions in a year. We're trending at about 4 million now. So we've lost a third of the transactions. That's why lenders are trying to be creative and agents are starving and need to develop a side hustle, is because there's so few transactions actually happening. It's not a crash in prices. It's a crash in number of deals happening, which does make it harder. You are right. It seems like it's harder when there's less deals happening, right? But here's how you make it easier. You watch the one metric that might make a seller take a lower amount. It's not comps. It's not the amount of work that needs to be done. It's days on market. Most of the counties in Washington state, the average days on market for the last 6 months has been 6 to 9 days on market. There was a period in 2020, 2021 where it felt like about 3 or 4 hours was the average, but it went to 6 or 9 days. So I started watching properties that were on the market more than 30 days. I tracked a couple that hit the 100-day mark and started making 80% offers. 90% offers, taking a kind of almost ignoring the list price, and just, this one was listed at 500 originally. I offered 4, it went to 477. I offered 4, it went to 444. I offered 4, went to 422. This person was stuck on even numbers. I offered 4, we settled on 4. I actually had some other knowledge that I accidentally found that made me think this was a motivated seller. So I just stuck with my price. And at that, it became a killer deal, because the ARV on this place, on the soft estimate, is over 750. Most of the investors that I've had look at it say it's closer to 9 or a million, 900 or a million. And I think 750 conservatively, with the 4 I purchased it and the 50 I'm probably going to end up spending on the rehab to just then create 300,000 more in net worth is weird. It's almost like investing in real estate. It's a good thing. But this was on the market for over 100 days, right? So my last deal in 2021, I purchased because I had the offer in within a couple of hours that was accepted. They got higher offers in after, but they were already working with me. And yes, I didn't have as much negotiation power. I was able to get the 400 down to $2,500 off, whatever the math is, $397,500, I think, is what we settled on. My couple of deals before that, I was getting 10,000 off negotiation with but this also, the inspection report didn't have much. What did I do? Go replace lights, locks, a little work to a garage door, but no replacement parts, just some work, and a ceiling fan. I spent less than $1,000 on all the repairs on that place from the MLS. So that was 2021, and that was speed. This is 2023. Days on market was the shift. So I really hope that answers your question. We watch the market. There are sometimes speed helps, and this time right now it's days on market. Watch days on market. Now, that doesn't mean that if it sits on the market for over 100 days, first, it means most MLSs, it's a 90-day posting. So if it's on at 100 or more, it's reposted already. You can watch price adjustments and everything, but that doesn't mean they're going to accept your offer. This place might not have been motivated, might not have wanted to sell, just thought, well, if I can get 500, I'll take it. Anything less, I'll keep it. This was a motivated seller, and I found, because I watched days on market and then I made ridiculously low offers and I stuck to my guns. So that is a good question. And I think that's how most of us feel every time. Every time I'm making offers, it's like, this is a really hard time to buy. In 2020, I purchased a fourplex, closed on January 6, 2020. And then the pandemic happened. Stocks tanked 30%. An eviction moratorium went into place. And I sat back thinking, wow, this is going to be a really hard time to buy real estate. And I was watching One Rental at a Time with Michael Zuber. I didn't start this YouTube channel until, ironically, January 6th, 2021, right? So it was a year after closing on my fourplex. And something about January 6th, weird. What are the odds? But I purchased a triplex in November of 2021 because I was watching One Rental at a Time. I sat back and I thought, man, this is a really hard environment. People don't have to pay the rent. Not one of my tenants ever didn't pay the rent. There's an eviction moratorium, so you can't evict anybody. But there was $46 billion in rent relief set aside by the CARES Act. Only $3 billion of that was tapped in the first 6 months. So it was part of that was because they messed up and the tenants had to apply for it. Then they shifted it with some revision later where the owners could apply for it. I had some tenants use the CARES Act money. I randomly would just get a check for 2 months worth of rent. Like the tenant would pay their rent, and then I got a check that month for the next 2 months. Twice that happened. But Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time was talking in 2020 of, has anybody noticed how much lower interest rates are? And so I started rerunning the math on some properties I looked at where the prices were still going up. Until I was like, there's an eviction moratorium going on. There's a nationwide shutdown going on. Why are prices going up? And then he pointed out the interest rate. So I ran the math again. I was like, wow, this found my triplex in November of 2020 when everybody was saying this is the worst time to ever buy because nobody has to pay rent. I bought probably one of my best deals that year. Watch the market, figure out what's shifting, and know whether it's speed. I wouldn't waive contingencies, but there are things you can do to make your offer more attractive. Higher earnest money, offer to do I wouldn't waive appraisal, but an appraisal gap coverage maybe of whatever you have that ability to do, $5,000 or $10,000, and then you can do, instead of a 10-day inspection period, do a 5-day inspection period. I wouldn't waive contingency on inspection because really that inspection contingency to me isn't about having the inspection done. It's about having some days to make up my mind after we're under contract. I hope that helps. And then I saw we had a super chat. Millennial Mike, send me an invite and like the video. It's a good thing I saw that. Let me see if I have the technical skills to get Mike on here before I lose everyone's interest. Hopefully I'm not sharing screen and giving away all the personal. If I'm sharing my screen and you see my stuff, ignore all the dating websites. That's not really. Here we go. Send this to. So Millennial Mike should be joining me as long as I notice that super chat in time. Dividend Dave, I hear marriage is the best investment ever. It can be. Can be. Let me know how it goes for you. Dave, yours seems to be going well. So it can be. And where was I? So I did the Roman, Anna K. Howdy, Anna. Tyler, nothing. Did I miss something? All-nighter hider. New Mike, what's up? Derek, I see a super chat. Do you think I'd be okay with pulling from a HELOC to buy an owner-occupied house, then rent out the house with the HELOC? So there's a few things to consider there. The first, do you think you'd be okay? Do I think you'd be okay legally? Yes, I think as long as the HELOC was acquired while you were actually still occupying the house. Yes. Howdy, Mike.
How's it going?
Marvelous. I am checking out a super chat that just came in from Derek on using a home equity line of credit to buy an owner-occupied house and then rent out the house with the home equity line of credit. As long as you are living there while you pull out the HELOC, you'll be legally fine, my opinion. Make sure that the lender doesn't put in the owner-occupied requirements of a year like there is often with an owner-occupied loan. And then buy the house that you're going to move into. You'd have to have the HELOC in place. Your debt to income ratio would have to be able to handle the 1%. So if your home equity line of credit is $100,000, the lender will consider $1,000 a month payment, even if you don't take all of the money out, because you could take out all the money to buy the house, to buy the next one. I kind of like the strategy. I think if you're buying an owner occupied property, this is probably not the part you're going to like, Derek. This is the part where I'm going to say something that I think challenges a lot of new investors. So please take this from my heart as I'm trying to help you. Not I'm trying to say you're wrong, right? Because I'm not saying you're wrong because I don't know your situation. An owner-occupied loan can be purchased with if it's your first one, 3%. Since you already own one, it'll be a 5% down for a single-family house with ADU, or duplex. So if you're doing a house hack purchase, and it was $1 million house, $1 million duplex, $1 million house with an ADU, you need to save $50,000 for that 5% down. So if it's $500,000, it's $25,000, right? So you can do the math on this. Before adding investment properties, when we're first starting out, people hate the idea of having to take time, but if you can take the time to save the down payment and not add debt to an existing asset, which that HELOC is going to increase the cost of that first asset because it might already have a mortgage. It might not now cash flow with a mortgage and a HELOC, even if it's rented out. Saving the down payment to acquire that house hack without the HELOC might add a year and a half to how long it takes you to acquire that asset, but you do it with a level of stability. You do it with a thicker margin. And there are people who use the home equity line of credit. It's what my brother did. I think there was a question earlier that I saw that I'm going to answer about it. I haven't got to it yet. Well, that's what he had, a paid off property, used the HELOC to buy the next one, paid it off, used the HELOC and got to 10 paid off properties. So it's absolutely a viable strategy. I just think the safer, less sexy, slower method is to save the down payment on that house hack. It's one of the reasons why I think Millennial Mike invested at distance. Instead of saving the down payment to purchase another house hack here close to a high cost of living area, you are saving about the same amount of money, buying a property all cash at a distance. And now you have that genius move where you find private money that you recycle the capital on, and that person gets a good 10% return, and you have the money to buy the next one, right? So it's one of the reasons why you develop that strategy to buy at a distance. Whereas if you were to take that same money and buy a house hack here every 2 years, it'd be a lot slower, it'd be less sexy, but you'd have, instead of $250 a door, you'd have $1,000 a door. You'd have a third of the doors with the same cash flow. Like it's just this plus or minus either way. But I think with Derek, with the HELOC, I think he'd be fine legally. I don't know if it's the best choice. Thanks for the advice, Dion. I think my super chat bugged out. Did you happen to get it? Jada. I might have. Let me check. I want to make sure I don't miss it. Derek's Jada. There it is. It didn't bug out. I'm just mentally challenged. So here's the super chat, which I missed from Jada. I'm making music and putting it on streaming sites and making money per stream. It costs $200 a month to make 2 songs. It'll slow my savings for real estate though. So if you're putting it on streaming, so it costs you money to put it on there. It's $200 a month to put it on there. How long would it take to generate income? And if it only costs you $200 a month, and focusing on music doesn't mean that it's $200 for the first few and then $200 for the next few and $200. I think $200 towards a business that you're growing isn't going to stop you in your tracks for real estate investing. I still think it's possible to focus on both the way that I talked about. So before I get to more of the questions, Mike, tell us a little bit about this first tenant in your Airbnb stuff that's going on.
Yeah, so I listed my Airbnb 2 days ago, converted the house hack duplex that I've been in for 5 years. I've had a long-term tenant over there. When it went vacant a couple months ago, I was convinced by somebody who has an Airbnb close to me. He said, "Hey man, I make $5,000 to $8,000 a month off my Airbnb. You're making $2,150 a month off a long-term tenant. Why not give Airbnb a shot?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" Took the last couple of months, all my days off to paint it, clean it, buy the furniture, go pick everything up, assemble it, put it together, make it look good. And finally got it listed 2 days ago. And in 2 days, I already got 2 bookings, each one for $350. So I've booked $700 worth of revenue out of it in just the 2 days that it's been active. So yeah, I'd consider that a decent success. I think probably the month of October will be a bit of a wash because people probably book further in advance. But hopefully coming up on the holidays, even though one of the bookings is in the month of October, so I'll still pick some money up. But hopefully I can book out. Anything more than $2,150 will be more than what I was getting from a long-term tenant. So I'll consider it a win. And hopefully I can double the numbers like my buddy projected.
And it's the other side of the unit that you're in. So it's very easy to self-manage a short-term rental like that.
Easy to do the cleaning.
Yeah. Have you found a good cleaning service yet too? Because I know you could probably do that yourself, but no. No,
what my plan is our friend Matt, who has an Airbnb like half a mile from ours. Once this thing's operating at a quick enough run rate that it's turning over and I need to get a maid in there, I'll just ask him whoever it is he uses and just have. There you go. Referrals are probably the best way to go. Right. Although with what they charge on these cleaning fees, I mean, a lot of these Airbnbs are like $80, $90 cleaning fees. I'm like, shoot, I mean, I picked that up myself to do some laundry and do some dishes. Why not? I'm not going to charge that much, but dang.
It's funny how that works. I mean, for something like that where you have one and it's next door, sure.
Right.
If it was 20 minutes away and you had 4 or 5 units going, I think that's where the cleaning service definitely comes in.
Yeah.
Angel R, feels like it's been forever since we had a Dion live. It has been 3 weeks. So I missed 2. So happy to be back. Glad we're in the internet world where Wi-Fi works. One of the drawbacks to going on cruises. I'm not sure I'm going to do that again. My first Norwegian cruise was great. The second one, I don't know. We had the B team running everything.
That's interesting. They cut down the streaming, because when I took that cruise through the Caribbean last year, you pay for an internet package, you still got Netflix, you got everything. You could do Zoom meetings and all that.
Could be a Norwegian thing.
Yeah.
You literally couldn't even open the websites for content creator. Like you go in and edit your video. It's not like you're going to be doing any data other than a little bit. It was blocked.
Wow. That sucks.
Jason says, hello, Millennial Mike. Catching up on your videos. I think I'm leaning towards Indiana. Nice.
Oh, my man. Out of state investing. Absolutely. Get it done.
Nice.
It's smart.
Yeah. BuzzTune is here. Howdy. Hopefully you're going to make it to some of the October course videos on Saturdays. Look forward to seeing you there. Josh, do you think your brother with 10 paid off rentals influenced that you just need fewer doors and could be happy? Absolutely. He was definitely an influence on. With 10 paid off, he has, even though he would never make it this far in one of my videos. He's stupid. You know how you're going to go do the cleaning service every now and then? He does his own roofing. So I'm way too lazy to do that. And he doesn't do it because he's like, oh, I don't have the money to do a roof. He has the money to do the roof. It's because he thinks he can do a better job. Mm-hmm. And he's actually, I think, better at it, because he's shown me several times things that roofers will do to go faster, cut corners, and that most roofing companies, the one thing that they do brag about is the speed of their product. We can get in and out in one day. We won't bother your tenants. So if your speed is important, sure. I'd rather you took 2 days and it didn't leak.
Do it right.
Tony, financial firefighter. Howdy. Stephan. David, what's going on? The Crash Brothers and Doomers are running to their mommies and caves. Exactly. We talk often about, sometimes there's like a guru out there saying, especially, and you and Mike talked about this the other day in one of your videos, the trajectory of people who their YouTube goes so big that they start doing syndications and they get away from their core, buy real estate, reach wealth. Instead of that, it's don't invest in real estate. Send me $500,000 and I'll invest for you. When we find gurus, it's kind of easy to say, and people jump on board with this. You actually had some really successful videos with over 60,000 views on them, where you go, here's a guru who isn't making money from what they're selling. Right? They're making money by selling the information. If you find somebody like Zuber who goes, here's this rental portfolio that gives me financial freedom. And then he develops a course and a book and he has YouTube and it's like, yeah, but if you took all of that away, he is still financially free, right? That's the person you want to follow. Mm-hmm. So we can point that out very easily. But when we go to the Crash Bros and we say, here is somebody who lives in their mom's basement, who doesn't own any rentals, who went bankruptcy, or is a mortgage broker who was part of the problem of the toxic loans in 2008, saying that there's a crash coming, and they don't own any rentals. Maybe they're not somebody you should listen to. It's like people's brains just shut off and they don't hear that last sentence. Wealth Building Journey loves the cameos from the extra strength water. I had the beginning of the video, I talked a little bit about my starting position. So whenever I do that, I like to make sure I'm hydrated. RA Sternus, congratulations to Chester on getting his first deal accepted. That is awesome. And there was a super chat from Dion's long lost son, which was appreciated.
I want to know who that really is. If it was somebody else that changed their name or what happened with that one. That's hilarious.
You never know.
It's coming from my inheritance. That's all I know. So I'm gonna have to fight him for it.
Exactly. Jared, thanks on when you think it would be better idea to offer a higher down payment, mostly when there's not much else to do with excess cash. So there are times where I've seen people say, if I do a bigger down payment, I increase my cash flow. Run the math, because there is some weird, above my ability to think, equation where the more you put in, the better the cash flow, but the lower the yield. And there's an inverted portion where as you put in more, even your yield increases. So I don't understand how it works. Run the numbers at what you're doing. Run the numbers at 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% down and see what your yield is. I would focus on yield more than cash flow. Higher yield would be important to me. I have done larger down payment by choice. My first duplex was a 5% down conventional. I had the VA loan available. Didn't want to use it for a couple of reasons. One, it's harder to get accepted. Two, I didn't want to be 100% levered because I had messed up and been 104% levered before on my first house, which was a mistake. Three, I wanted the VA loan as an option in case I ever found the right deal when I didn't have the funds to purchase it. Like, there were reasons I was keeping it. Since then, I've always done 20 or 25% down on each property because I wanted a good equity position. I wanted a good cash flow and I wanted the good return. And that was kind of the sweet spot that I found. So I don't know if it ever makes sense to do higher down, except I'll give you an example where it actually made sense to put more down. Over the last 2 years, I was saving money. And with the cash flow from rentals, a limited living expenses, because still house hacking, rental income, side hustle money coming in, I had saved basically about $500,000. So I was increasing what I was looking for. I was looking for at least $1 million fourplex, going to put down, $250,000 as the down payment. So I was looking for increasingly larger and larger, more expensive properties. But I also started doing a search for a self-funded BRRRR. Hard money is one of the biggest problems I have with the BRRRR project because, and Mike ran into this, you start 2 BRRRR projects and then by the time you go to refinance, interest rates doubled, right? So what if rehab timeline is longer? What if rehab costs are more? What if after repair value is off? What if interest rates double? Like, all of those what ifs, those are problems. But the problem is really the hard money. You borrowed money that has a high interest rate and a timeline. If you don't pay it off in a certain amount of time, that hard money becomes very expensive. So I wanted to do a BRRRR that didn't have a strict timeline, didn't have hard money. I self-funded it. So I purchased this place for 4. Contractor said I was going to spend 30. I'm going to spend about 50 is what it's looking like. And I budgeted 80, right? So I'm going to burn my own money into it, maybe refinance, maybe leave the money in there and enjoy the cash flow, right? So I did 100% down on this one because it made sense this time. So it's never, from Quentin Tarantino, the less a man makes declarative statements, the less apt he is to look foolish in retrospect. So I wouldn't say never pay more or never pay less or always pay more. It is specifically case by case. Run the numbers at each amount that you're thinking of putting down. Look at what your yield is, and then look at all the other factors that are there to see what is the best way to go. Because I think it's different every time.
The complex way of saying a closed mouth gathers less feet.
Yeah, exactly.
But I came up with a similar problem and a somewhat similar solution because I wanted to do the BRRRR method, but on a longer time frame. So I've been doing what I now call the slow burn method. And that's where I use a home equity line of credit to pay for a property cash. I buy it significantly under value on amazing seller finance terms. So I come in with my own cash, home equity line of credit. I buy it, I own it in my name. Then what I do is I use private money. And I structure the private money deal so that I can pay them interest only for up to 8 years. So I can give them a preferred return, 10% on their money, which is cheaper than what my payment would be if I was doing principal and interest. If I actually especially right now with the fact that interest rates are at like 8 or 9% anyways, principal and interest, of course, is more than just interest only. But even before, when interest rates were a little bit lower. So I figured out a way to make it so that I can cash flow for the next 8 years. And in those 8 years, I'm paying off that private lender who's giving me the money. I buy the property as such undervalue, and then I use my own cash to do a value add to it. So for instance, with my triplex, I bought it for 60. brought the private money lender in to pay myself my 60 grand back. I owe her a $500 payment a month, and it rents out for $2,400 a month. So it's easy to pay her out of the existing cash flow. I have up to 8 years with no prepayment penalty to do a cash out refinance into a payment or structure that would work so I can cash her out of the deal. I did a value add, put about $30,000 into it. It's now worth 200. So it's the Burr method, but on a much longer time frame with private money. Hard money sucks. Hard money versus private money is a conversation I just had in one of my videos recently. Hard money is trash. It's just trash. It's almost as trash as actual lenders. Actual lenders are trash. Everything's garbage right now. Don't buy a deal like that. Get creative, or pay all cash like Dion.
I think we should make a separate video this week on our problem with the Burr method.
Sure. Yeah.
Something like that. Because
like you said, you get forced into too quick or crappy rates, or you miscalculated the repairs. So you got to figure out how to alleviate all of those problems.
Right. So it's a good strategy. And here's the things you can do to mitigate it. You have a strategy that's working. I have one that I chose. There we go. All Night Hider is thinking it's Dividend Dave as my long lost son. Michael, he's not talking about the stock market to get today's bargains on stocks. No. No, I'm not talking about stocks at all. I wouldn't own stocks if they came with free tacos. Mike's probably gone. Looks like, I don't know if this was, someone maybe new to the channel. I don't recognize the name. Maybe you've been here before though. Stocks work great for somebody who focuses and takes the amount of time that I've learned real estate to focus on stocks. So when I make jokes about college or stocks or running a business or marriage, it's because I've not been successful at any one of those. Doesn't mean they're not viable. Just means they're not good choices for me. And stocks would take, I want to say, not 10, 5 to 10 times the amount of money invested that I did in real estate. I'd have less control. I'd be less diversified. Miguel, what was the most you earned in your W-2 before retiring? So most years up until probably 2019, maybe 2018, I don't think I ever broke 60,000. As a police officer, I was making around 50 and then added some overtime and probably came close to 60. If you added side hustle, then I broke 60. 2020 and 21 and the first half of 22, I actually made pretty decent money. The company was trying to figure out how to keep me around, and I started getting what I would consider to be like an equity share. I had golden handcuffs. I would get paid about $2 million if there was a sale while I stayed there. Walked away from that, don't care. But my highest year was, I think, 226,000. But that's a huge change up until 2018, never breaking 60. And then all of a sudden, those last couple of years, a couple $100,000 seems like if you've only made 60 most of your life and all of a sudden you make a couple 100,000, you think you'd stay at that job, right? Not when you find financial freedom through rentals. You just go, I'm out of here. It's been fun. You can pay me $1 million a year. I'd still have walked away.
That is one of your greatest stories. Yeah, I'm just so carefree and kind of going with the flow that I didn't actually realize how stupid it was of me to keep working until I decided to make a video showing how it looks to retire. And then I realized, God, why the heck am I still working?
And I want to do a follow-up to that video.
What'd you say?
I said I wanted to do a follow-up to that video. I ran the numbers on that video when I was doing it. I was projecting about 168,000 that year. That year ended at 203. Yeah. So had I done the video, it would have been even bigger numbers. Now, because I stopped recording that video and I sat down and I was looking at the whiteboard after recording it thinking, I would work 60 hours, 70 hours a week for that money. Mm. And I'm getting it with the 2 hours a month.
Or I could just balance. He was saying forever, he was like, anytime between now and the next 3 years, which I kind of, took to mean probably in the next 3 years, leaning closer to 3 years. And then all of a sudden he was just like, oh yeah, I retired today. What? Like 2 months after he started saying that phrase.
Yeah, it was right around that video too. It was so funny. Wandering Doc, howdy. I hope you're enjoying your recent retirement. My experience was the same. Bought my first condo in 2011, started house hacking A part of it in late 2012, financially free with 5 rentals and 18 or so passive syndication investments by 2021. Awesome. Funny how this works. Wealth building journey, net profit after tax and after cost of selling. Yep, Dividend Dave. Thanks for the super chats. So either Dave is really good at switching his name back and forth, but who knows? Alantino.
It probably is Dave, honestly. It probably is.
It's his kind of that, I don't know.
It's his type of humor. And having 2 YouTube accounts, of course, we all do. I've seen you from your like Dion's alt account or whatever.
I'm seeing, I got a bunch of text. Lumberjack landlord. I wanted to have a conversation with him. So I will have to reach out. I see your text now. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I literally was about to walk out of the house because you hadn't sent an invite. I was like, all right, I'm going to the gym. I'll just keep listening. And then all of a sudden you said, oh, I'm going to invite Mike. I was like, God dang it, run back inside.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's weird. When someone calls me, it interrupts, but a text won't come through.
That's why I sent you a super chat.
Well, I appreciate it. And it got you here, which I appreciate you coming
30 minutes before you read it.
Dang it.
Sorry, you look great.
Glad to be here. Glad you're here, Tony, too. Wandering Dog. Dion, now let's hear some tips for us guys not married, but looking to have a few kids.
Oh, dude, that is the struggle.
So that perfect question, because Mike, you're here. You're actually I've heard you. Can I share what you've said to me, or
dude, you can share everything.
Okay, you said so. So without naming any names, your idea is find a decent woman, right? They exist. They're out there. I 100% know it, because my problem isn't with women. It's with the system we live in. It's a wealth redistribution system, and my people picker is broken, that too. But who will sign basically like a prenup parenting plan before, saying we're going to have a kid. This is how it's going to work, because you don't have the faith in marriage. You have the faith in parenting. My answer, and then I'll let you give your full version with all of the details that I missed and what I just summed up. Wandering Doc, here's how I would look at it. And again, my 3 kids will never make it this far into my video. I do have a son who'll watch shorts. So if I make a short, he gets it, but it's not going to make this far into a video. And I'm going to say this and probably get a lot of hate, but I'm going to blame it on the water. Absolute transparency. My goal is to share completely transparent as much as possible, to show that it's possible to reach financial freedom, even with some barriers that you have. So that transparency bleeds into these overshares with stuff like this. So I'm sorry for this overshare. Blunt honesty. I apologize in advance. I have 3 kids that I never wanted. We're talking birth control, protection, women who swore they would delete if something happened. And then we had 3 kids. Once they're born, they're my responsibility, and I love them, and I fought for custody, and I raised all 3 of them. They've turned into amazing adults. I never wanted to have kids because, and Mike, I know you have a different opinion on this aspect of this than I do, but life sucks. Everything hurts. It's hard. It's a struggle. You're going to suffer through things, right? So I don't want to create kids who have to go through all the suffering. But, Wandering Doc, there are kids who are already created in an orphanage, in an adoption center, that had I not had kids, and I decided at some point, like you, that I changed my mind, now I want to have kids, instead of having them, remember, I took responsibility and I raised my kids and I love them. I didn't want to have kids. It doesn't mean that I don't want them because they're born now. But I think had I had the chance to adopt people, the kids that become people, who are already going to suffer through everything that happens in life, all of the pain and discomfort and tragedy and stuff that sucks, and then dedicate the time and energy that I put into my kids into kids who were already going to exist and make their life better, that would have been the route that I chose. So if you're a single guy and you're looking to have kids, instead of doing what Mike is doing, because everything you do right now while you're getting along with somebody and you agree to sounds great, but as soon as you don't agree, no court paper stands up in court. If presented right, the court systems can disregard prenups, they can disregard parenting plans, they can disregard agreements with prosecuting attorneys. You've probably seen that, where they override sentencing on one of your cases. Wandering Doc, my solution would be look into adoption. They already exist. Everything bad that's already going to happen to them is going to happen to them without you having to create somebody to go through all of that. And you can make their life better. All right, my overshare is done.
So unfortunately, it's extremely hard to adopt when you're single, especially as a man, because that triggers a whole bunch of red flags towards possible abuse. Even as a totally legitimate married couple, I got a friend who I work with, him and his wife can't have kids. He's a police officer like me. His wife's a teacher. They've been on a list for 2 years, trying as hard as they can to adopt a troubled child out of a third world country. And it's just very, very difficult. But I agree with you. There's kids who need help. If you can't help them, great. That being said, I think that there's a large amount of people who want to have their own kids. I want to have my own kids. I have one son. I'm one on my way to 50. And at this point, I'm probably going to have to recruit at least 5 to 6, maybe more helpers to get to that 50. I'm just kidding. Probably not quite 50. But the problem is, I understand here with Wandering Doc, you want kids. Do you really want to get married? And as you mentioned earlier, the system is set up to the point where it puts the genders against each other, and one of them comes out on top 85% of the time when it comes to kids and 92% of the time when it comes to alimony. I listened to a divorce attorney break down how getting married today actually meets the definition of legal negligence. Because when you look at the statistics and rates of divorce, and then how you end up coming out of that divorce with your assets cut in half or just straight up gone, you get the debt, you lose the house, the cars, the retirement, and you pay a lot of child support, it technically meets the definition of legal negligence. It's a real sucky thing. So me personally, I probably won't ever get married ever. I think it's too risky. Maybe, like you said, you don't want to get backed into any definitive statements. Maybe one hell of a prenup, but they get routinely disregarded or annulled or changed or thrown out or whatever. So
the last thing, Wondering Doc, on the advice for somebody who wants to have kids, married or single. I don't think that we should focus on creating generational wealth for our kids. I think that puts some barriers in their life, takes away the motivation for them to be their own successful person. I think the most important thing that you can do, which you've done since you retired early with your cash flow from your investments, is invest in such a way that you don't become a financial burden to your kids when you're too old to work. That's what most parents that I know do. They're on their kids' cell phone plans, car insurance plans, funding, whatever it is. It's a cultural thing, I think, from certain areas where I've got friends who marry a spouse from Southeast Asia, and then they both send half their income to the family every month. I get it. Different cultures do different things. But here in the melting pot of the US, helping your parents is a choice, great. But us becoming parents who don't take care of our own finances, who then force our kids to have to take care of us, I think that's the biggest mistake people make. Wealth Building Journey makes a point here. Millionaires pay the lion's share, 89%, I believe, of taxes. The rest come from billionaires and 100,000-aires. So paying taxes, yes, the more wealthy a person is, the more they're going to pay in taxes. An example is last year, my last couple of years at the CDL school, I made about 200,000. My last year before retiring, I made 200,000 from rentals, right? From my rentals, I paid zero in income taxes. And from my W-2, I probably paid about $50,000 in income tax, right? So it seems like the person who makes $200,000 paid more taxes than the person who invested in real estate. But in this $200,000 in real estate, think of all the taxes I paid for repairs, maintenance, property tax, the property tax was about $42,000 that year. So it's really close to the income tax I paid. So while I didn't pay income tax, that's the part that so many, please don't be offended, poor people focus on when they talk about taxes. They say, Trump only paid $725 in taxes in 4 years, and Bill Gates doesn't pay anything. Well, yeah, on income, because working for money is the dumbest way to make it. But how much property tax, how much employer tax was paid with every employee that they had? How much tax was paid on the beginning of this year? I bought 4 refrigerators and 3 water heaters, one way or the other on those. Taxes on each one, taxes on the wages to have them installed. But income tax from rentals, zero. So when we compare who's paying the bulk of taxes, when it comes to income tax, it's the middle class. right? It's like 44% of people didn't pay any taxes. So super wealthy people aren't paying any income tax. Poor people are getting child tax credit or an income tax credit, not paying taxes. They get money back at the end of the year compared to how much they put in. It's that middle class people who are being destroyed by taxes on income. But property taxes, employer taxes, capital gains taxes is all being paid by wealthier people. All-night hydro, don't encourage them. Wandering Dog, Virgin Voyages, even the free included internet was fast enough to stream. Geez, YouTube wasn't blocked. The faster packages were affordable. Plus, Virgin Voyages was voted best ships, best rooms, and best overall. I will have to check that out. I've done only 2 cruises because, I never really took any vacations till I was 48, and then I've been doing them since. And most of those have been months in other countries. So we will see. Maybe I'll check them out. All-Nighter Hider says you're not invited after your super chat.
Yep.
Have you done any cruises yet, Mike?
Yeah, I took a cruise last year. I said it earlier. I took a cruise last year down to the Caribbean, and that was the first one I ever went on. It was super cheap because they were still coming out of post-pandemic low prices, trying to get people to come back. Dirt cheap, and it was a lot of fun. I absolutely have to do it again. It's tons of fun.
And that was the only one?
It's the only one I've ever taken. It was a 6-day cruise.
Nice.
I'm waiting for you.
I think I remember Instagram pictures because you did the cruise and there was a lot of beaches involved in that.
Yeah. Any smart man says there's always an excuse to put some female in beach clothing. That's why would I take anything other than a cruise? Like,
Rob suggests that you look abroad.
In the eyes or
like other countries.
I see what you're sorry about that. My bad. No, yeah, the passport bros, we up. That's just playing the game on easy mode, though, honestly.
It is.
Where's the challenge?
If you watched, are you old enough to even know who Eddie Murphy is?
Of course. He was the donkey in Shrek.
He brought Shrek. Okay, Shrek. Yeah, okay, that does make sense.
Mulan.
All right. So not Beverly Hills Cop, the Golden Child, none of the like real Eddie Murphy stuff. Okay.
Dr. Dolittle. I just remember all the kids' movies. That's what I remember.
I love the gap between us in age. It's perfect.
Right.
We know a lot of the same actors, but at very different stages in there.
Right.
So, he did a stand-up comic one time about being a passport bro and bringing somebody here. And one of the first words in English that person is going to learn is half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Adam Calhoun says, "What's up, Mike? Been enjoying all the new content. If I ever head to Seattle, I'm staying at the 90s Airbnb." Awesome.
Come visit. It'll be a good time. We'll hang out. We'll get a complimentary coaching session with me if you book at my Airbnb. That promise goes out to anybody.
If you want, I don't know if have you done that. You could put a link in the chat to it if you wanted to.
If people want to like it, yeah, I could, but it's your live. We don't need to do that.
That's okay. We can get you business. Bill O'Connell, would your new place make a good short-term rental? And if so, is that something you might try? It would. It's right on the water. You can walk a kayak across the street. I've got inflatable
Paddleboards.
Got a couple of those.
It's
got 2 wraparound decks, that full water view both sides. But I'm not going to. I want a long-term tenant in the other side so that there's consistently the same person here to take care of the property when I'm overseas. It would make a great one. And if I was, my plan right now is to travel for like the next 5 years till I get sick of traveling. And then I'm probably going to stay mostly in the US. At that point, I might do short-term with it. Not quite planning on it, but yeah, it definitely would. It'll rent. I have a tenant already at 18. I think an area average comps would be 2,000 or 22, but this is a person who's also going to take care of my unit when I'm not here. So they're kind of getting a good deal. Greg, I'm 65 and paid off most of my rentals. I just paid a big tax bill. Probably should have kept them, but no regrets. I'm with you. If you've had them long enough to pay them off and you've depreciated them over years, but you've got rentals that you purchased at 2020, 1990 prices and you're getting 2023 rents, I'm okay with writing a check for taxes. The profit that you have there. Awesome. Congratulations. Beautiful. Love it. Pondering Doc, Dave, I'll be based on the Philippines from October, looking at Mexico and Colombia to build a family. Nice.
Smart man.
I don't care since what I've built up until now came before the marriage and therefore are not marital assets. I'm fine splitting everything after the marriage 50-50. Understand how a lot of the state's laws work.
Yeah, that's a risky.
Washington is great. We don't have alimony, but we do have palimony, and we do have this thing called meretricious, which after a certain amount of time, even assets acquired before are all considered. So know your local laws.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Once you're together, all assets acquired after that, even if they're assets acquired with the cash flow from assets that you owned before, but you work together on that, absolutely. That's both of your money. Frank. Howdy, Frank. My home is worth 87, refinanced to 1.87, 15 years in 2021. Now heavy in debt, credit cards, 454K. Should a HELOC or just pay it off? So the credit cards have an adjustable rate. You're probably being eaten alive by that now if it's 54,000. First thing I would do is figure out what spending is causing you to go into credit card debt and stop that. Right. Bucketing water out of a ship isn't going to help if the hole's cracked. Fix the crack, then get rid of the water. I have no idea if that analogy worked, but I would not take unsecured credit card debt and back it with a real asset. A consolidation unsecured line of credit with a fixed rate interest might be a better way than a HELOC, but don't take your asset and back unsecured debt with it. I think that's a mistake. Focus on getting rid of it. Focus on stop creating more. Mike, do you have a different opinion on that? I think
that's literally exactly what I would recommend, dude. How'd you spend $54,000 on a credit card? Stop the bleed right now. You got to immediately stop the bleed before you can start addressing other problems. And then, yeah, I mean, probably even if you do a HELOC, maybe it benefits you because if your credit cards are at 20%, your HELOC's at 10%, then you're just trading one debt for another with a lower interest rate, in which case that would make sense. It's going to give you some breathing room. So that might be a good answer, but yeah, attack that debt and pay it off because that's an awful lot. And I don't know what it's in. Hopefully it's in something intelligent, but if it's like vacations and stuff, bro, what are you doing?
Right. I mean, if you went through a divorce, death, loss of a spouse, significant change in employment, massive medical concern, and you had that, but now that's under control, it's a different story. If in the last 2 years you had your mortgage and your lifestyle created $54,000 in credit card debt, and then in the next 2 years, you add the cost of a home equity line of credit, you would then probably create more than $54,000 in debt in the next 2 years. I'd find a way to get that under control. All Nighter Hider says income tax is optional. Is it? Sales tax is a burden of the business. Income tax is optional. I think if you're going to argue a specific constitutionality, yes, all taxation is theft. I'm with you. I don't know if it's optional. The IRS, with their armed agents and our prison sentence structure around tax evasion, didn't work out so great for Blade, right? What's his actual name? Did 4 years for Wesley Snipes. Thank you. Yeah. Didn't seem too optional for him. BuzzTune, thank you for this. Dion's course is $100 off special till the end of the month, plus October Saturday live streams. Loving the course. That's awesome. Thank you. It is the course for the lazy person. How to do this while working full-time, while being a parent, while still having a life. Angel R. Quick question. Tenant's kitchen breaker trips when using air fryer and microwave together. Should call an electrician or insist on one appliance at a time. Cost $900 to fix. So there is a specific loadout amount required, especially in the kitchen, where you have to have, I think it's over a certain number. There's 2 breakers to handle a kitchen, kind of for this reason. So make sure that you're compliant there and make sure So if it's tripping, it's in the kitchen. If it's within 6 feet from the sink, it should have a GFCI breaker in there. I would look at a couple of things. Angel, have you been to their unit, or your property manager been to their unit, and have you looked at the microwave that they're using? If it's a dinosaur from the 90s and it's pulling too much power, that could be the issue. If it's not, and it's $900 to fix, I'd get a couple of estimates. That seems like a significant amount for an electrical repair of just putting in another breaker. Get a couple of estimates and see if that's it. If it's tripping when those two things are going, I would probably pay to have the breakers put in, because when breakers trip, it's because it was too much of a load. And if you're lucky, those breakers keep tripping. What happens when that breaker stops functioning properly and doesn't trip? And then the heat from that burns down the place, and you have a tenant who notified you of an issue that you could have corrected. We're probably trying to think if I've ever had anything similar where something, oh, I did. Yeah, I'd almost, wasn't the same. Light flickering in the hallway. Looked at panel, found several of the breakers were kind of failing, so I replaced the entire panel. That was $2,200, but they did some other work while they were there too. Got your new batteries in, Mike?
We're good.
Okay, good. Angel, are these tenants act naive? You mean they're tenants? That's what that is. Justin, hey, Dion, when you list your rentals to find new tenants, do you require potential new tenants to fill out an application first before showing them the property? Have you done it both ways? So yes, I've done it both ways, but there's a caveat to it. When I list a new rental, my goal is, if I'm going to take my time to go show the property, that person has to fill out an application first. But I get it's an expense, right? I think Hemlane puts it on Zillow, and apartments is like 45 and Zillow is 38. So whatever the cost is to the applicant, I don't want them to spend that if they don't want the house. So I say, if you want a one-on-one showing, here's the application link. If you would like, on Thursday at 8 o'clock or Thursday at 5 p.m. or Saturday at 4 p.m., I'm going to be at the property for 1 or 2 hours, depending on how much interest I have for the property, to do an open house format. If you'll show up in that time, you can come and see it without an application. So the tenants who really want it can, fill out the application, get a showing. I'll put my time in if they're putting their money in. But if somebody wants to, and I totally understand the logic, not waste the money on an application on a place that they might not want, then here's my open house version to come and see it. And I'm very clear, there will be other applicants there at the same time. We'll walk through and I'll show you everything. So that's how I mitigate my time on that one. Mitigate my loss of time on that one. And then Wealth Building Journey, put in a link to my course on there, which you can also find. So there's 3 things you can do on there. It's at diontalk.com, but there's the link. The first is you can book an hour of time with me. And it usually goes into like an hour and a half or 2 hours or something. I want to do a deep dive into your situation. Or you can take the binder course, which is free. Like, there's no cost for the binder course. And in that, you get my strategy where I get my tenants to ask me to increase the rent. How I would do it with Section 8, which I've done it. How I would do it if I had a property manager, which I don't have, but I've had people with them use this strategy. How I would do it at a distance, how I've done it locally, how I've done it in person, how I've done it online through text and email. All of the nuances of how it works in there for free. And then I've included my seller financing letter and my spreadsheet that I use to track all of my income and expenses for my rental portfolio, created by me and my CPA. All of that for free in the binder strategy. And then you could take the course for the lazy person on reaching financial freedom, which has the $100 off till the end of the month. And we're doing live Zoom calls where everybody can jump on Zoom in the course for the whole month of October. And a couple of people sign up this week. I'm excited to getting to know them, getting to know their situation, their goals, and which we're going to decide is the best path to get there. Han, sorry. Have you thought about investing out of state? Mike, have you thought about investing out of state?
I have. In fact, I thought about it so much, I've done it over and over and over again. This is one of the topics that's going to be covered at Zuber's 2-day live event, which if you haven't bought tickets for yet, you need to. They're going quickly. All of the VIP tickets sold out in 48 hours. Then Mike added 15 more VIP tickets, sold out in another like 5 hours. There's still general admission left over, but you need to get those. We want to see you guys in Vegas. Like, I know Hyder's going to be there. I don't know if anybody else from the chat here is going to be there. I don't know if Dividend Dave's bought tickets yet or Chester's bought tickets yet, but a ton of people from the comment section, plus the Lumberjack, Dion, myself are going to be there. Anyways, to the out-of-state investing question, Brian Adamson, who's big time long distance real estate investor, lives in Florida, invests in Detroit at a distance, owns a ton of units. He's like the second speaker day one talking all about out-of-state investing. And then me, I live in Seattle. I invest in Indiana. I'll be on a panel the final day with Dion and Lumberjack and Zuber answering everybody's questions. And then, of course, there's the break-offs groups at lunch and after hours, anything that you want. I'll be there to chat with people about. Out-of-state investing is a tremendous opportunity for people who are in markets where the numbers just don't make sense, or they're in areas where being a landlord it's not a business-friendly area for the legal climate, like eviction moratoriums, things like that. And so investing at a distance is great, but how do you do it? How do you do it safely? How do you make sure you don't lose money? How do you know how to buy something at a distance? How do you know you're buying in the right neighborhood? How do you know you found the right property manager? How do you know that you've got a good team of people on the ground to make sure that things operate properly without you there to double check their work? There's so many different things we can get into that I can't do it here. And you can message me on Instagram or check my channel out. But yeah, out-of-state investing is the right answer for a lot of people. But let's talk about that offline or do some more research after this live.
So I was kind of being a little facetious on thinking about investing out of state. That is your strategy. And a lot of people reach out to me with questions on it, and I refer them to you, right? If somebody wants to know how to self-manage over 100 units and do their own rehabs, manage their own rehab teams, I refer them to Matt, right? So we've got this nice list of people with their specific niches that we can send people to. So if the question was directed at me, have I ever thought about investing out of state? Earlier this year, I went and spent about a month and a half in Portugal because I was going to invest out of state and country and continent.
Right. Hemisphere.
And almost, yeah. So east-west hemisphere, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't have a good experience. Loved the area. Didn't like the people. So I'm not buying in Portugal. Instead, I decided to look for another house hack here or invest at a distance in Gary and take the cash flow from that investment or this house hack and use that to pay for my Airbnbs, Verbos, hotels when I travel in other countries. So instead of buying in another country, I'll have a rental income here that I dedicate towards my traveling expenses. So I accomplished the same thing, but I'm not tied to just one country. And I was looking at what I did here in Washington is I expanded my market out. I hit about 11 new markets by going out another 30 minutes from where I was investing. 2 of them made really good sense near Shelton and Bremerton, Washington, those 2 kind of area markets. I was finding deals there because remote work has raised rents, but not prices yet. People can rent there and travel to the office once or twice a week instead of every day, but they don't want to buy because they might get forced back into the office next year. So rents have gone up here significantly, but not prices. So if I didn't find this place that I ended up buying, my goal was by about this time of the year, like I started looking in June and closed at the end of July. If I didn't find this place that I closed on, I would then be looking at Mike and taking trips with you to Gary and figuring out the landscape there and investing at a distance. If you're going to invest at a distance, here's what matters the most to me. When I'm a teaching assistant for the BiggerPockets rookie boot camps, and they've got some great things that they cover. And I've worked with people that invest at a distance, and it's their thing is to like, how do you pick a market? And most of the investors will say, you can check crime statistics at crimestop.com. You can check population trends by going to county websites or looking at U-Haul and trending where their trucks are going. You can look at economic drivers. You can look at all of these things, but the thing that matters the most to me is, why does that sound all of a sudden? The thing that matters to me the most is trusted boots on the ground. You live there or used to live there and know the market, or someone that you know and trust lives there and knows the markets. Or in my case, somebody like Mike watched somebody like Mark invest for months to figure out how does this work, get the trusted boots on the ground, and then you piggybacked off of his systems to get started there. I would piggyback off of Mike's to get started there because I trust Mike. Who do you know that invests in another market that you trust, that you can use their resources to get started there? That's what I would do if I was going to invest out of state. Dividend Dave, when I first met Dion, I tripped over him. That's because earlier I made a comment of most people don't believe I'm 4'2". That's why I like when we get together, I'll do the stretch my legs out and be this tall and have you stand up straight and get a picture. I think that entertained it. Where would we do that? Robinhood, I think.
Yeah, Robinhood.
The wealth building journey sounds like a plan. Once I get the report from the inspector, I'll send it over to you. All I can say is be prepared. I appreciate it. I will take a look through it. I'll probably share it with Mike and we'll look at it together and we'll look for things to say yes or no on.
Sure.
Angel R says, great job with the 90s Airbnb, Millennial Mike.
Thank you.
Nice. Rahul, I struggle with the broke to millionaire in 10 years. Median income is about 75K, expenses 70K, but assuming saving 15%, it's $915 a month. Even with 20% rate of return, it's $350K. 15 years is a little more realistic. I appreciate that, and I'm hoping that you're still here because I know the comment was made a while ago. We're probably going to be wrapping this up soon because we get this lag between comments and where we're talking. But Rahul, if you're still here, first let me know if I'm even saying your name anywhere close to right. It's because the compound interest of 20% is not what I'm going for. I'm getting about a 50% return because we get the cash flow. Yeah, that gets me an average first year 10% return and by third year 20%. So we're in the market there. But that's just on the cash flow. I'm gaining appreciation on multiples, at least 4 times what I invest. So the average appreciation every year is 5% for real estate over a 50-year time period. In the last 2, it's been 19 and 24%. So we're going to take those out and only go with the 5%. If I invest $100,000 into a duplex, it's a $400,000 duplex, and it goes up 5%, that 5% annual projected normal increase, not the 19 or 24 that we actually had, but 5% on my 100,000. Your brain says, well, it's $5,000. No, that's $20,000 because it's 5% of the gross value. The bank doesn't get the appreciation we do. Then the tenants are paying off the mortgage every month. For a while, it was about $3,000. Now it's about $3,600 to $3,800. I got to actually do the math on that, on what's being paid off every month of my mortgages. And then I don't pay any taxes on this income. That's why 10 years, starting from a really bad position where I had $89,000 in bad debt I didn't know about until the divorce, was making $17 an hour after getting laid off from law enforcement. And it still, as a single parent with 3 kids, only took 8 years to make work optional. I worked for 4 more and retired at 12 years, even though I love my job. Time freedom won out. So it's not the math and the return. And I never made $75,000 until like the last 3 years. The financial freedom happened in 8 years while never making more than $60,000 a year in a high cost of living area where my debt to income ratio wouldn't allow me to buy a house. I wasn't making enough to buy a house. But I was able to buy a duplex because I moved into an apartment and rented my house out for 2 years to get rental income on my tax returns. Once I had that for 2 years, now I could buy a small multifamily because they'll look at 75% of those rents in my debt to income ratio. So if we think linearly with stocks, yeah, I think 30 years to reach financial freedom, to have anywhere close to the net worth that I have now on the income that I had. That's why I didn't choose stocks. I chose something that has exponential growth with compounding sources of income, cash flow, which increases over time because, Mike, you know the statistics since 1940, rents have never once gone down in a 5-year period. They go up. Mortgages almost stay the same. So rents make more. Value add to properties like adding a 3rd bedroom, using the binder strategy to get my tenants to ask me to raise the rent. Then you add appreciation on 4 times what you invest that grows every month, compound growth, 5% every year, but it's 5% on top of the one from before. Then the principal pay down and the tax benefits. I think 10 years is the long time. Mike, have you done the math yet on when you cross the millionaire status?
Yeah, I actually responded to Rahul Punakar like 2 more comments down. And I said, I said, Rahul, I just did it in the last 5 years, from broke to millionaire. It can be done. To which his response was that the last 10 years were an anomaly. We're in a reversion to the mean. And I've heard that thing said. And then I said, hey, man, it's just your mindset. And then we went back and forth for a little while. And I think we agreed.
It's all, and contradicting opinions are good. If everyone came in here and said, oh, I love real estate and this is super easy, why would we do this? But if somebody comes in here and says, here's why I don't think it would work, and they're kind of dug in, and we go, okay, well, here's some facts, and let's be very conservative. Yes, we had the last 2 years, we had 19 and 24% appreciation here in this state. You're investing in Indiana. They didn't have 19 and 24% appreciation. They had more along the historical norms of 5% a year. I think one of the years it was like 3%, but 5% a year growth on the total value of the property. So you purchase the property, you're going to get the 5% annual growth on that purchase. But now you're taking private money to purchase the next property. And then you're doing the value add. So you're compounding all these different ways to make the net worth happen much faster than with almost any other asset class.
So I started my YouTube channel in 2017, and I forecasted this exact argument years ago, like 6-7 years ago at this point, because I said to myself, in 2017, I just gotten divorced, didn't have custody of my son, had $0 in the bank account, had nothing to my name. I was the broke guy. And I said, I'm going to become successful with real estate investing. And I don't know how, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm going to video record and document the whole thing. So my first video on my channel, it's grainy, it's poor quality. I sound awkward in front of a camera, but you can watch all of my first videos. I own nothing because I wanted to document the whole process. And sure enough, in less than 5 years, I managed to get to where I'm at now, cross the millionaire threshold, which I literally crossed like within the last couple of months. I have a video that I've just been sitting on waiting to release. But yes, I made it from broke, divorced, single father to millionaire from real estate in under 5 years. And you can say it's an anomaly. I think that we can look at any period of time and say anomalous things happened in any decade, in any real estate market. It was an anomaly for the 2007, 2008 financial crash, Great Recession. We haven't seen that happen again. .com bubble burst, the 18% interest rates in the 80s. There's an anomaly every decade. Figure out how to make it work.
And I see lower here where Rahul said, well, just show me the math. And I think I did. It's not a gain on what you invest. It's a return on what you invest is your cash flow. Then the appreciation is on the multiples of your cash flow. Then the principal pay down happens, and then tax benefits actually make it happen. But I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the video, Rahul, probably not. It seems like maybe you're new to the channel. But one of the things I said at the very beginning of the video is net worth doesn't matter. It's fictitious and it means nothing. I was almost 2 years after reaching millionaire status that I did a video on what came first, $1 million in net worth or $1 million in debt. That's when I even realized I was a millionaire, because it doesn't matter. Cash flow sets us free. The average person can reach enough cash flow in 10 years, whether they have a net worth of 0 or $1 billion, to set them free, because the net worth means nothing. I'm never going to, my plan is to never sell my properties. No cash out refinance, no home equity line of credit, no sell to 1031. None of those things are going to happen for me. So the net worth means nothing. Cash flow is what set me free. I talked about that at the very beginning of the video. So anybody watching this in Futureland saw, because it kind of cuts out the first minute or two for some reason. It doesn't matter to be a millionaire. It doesn't matter to have a high net worth. What matters is, do you have the cash flow to live the life that you want to without having to sell your life 1 hour at a time? And then I see you guys went back and forth a bit. All night hard. Investing is a very personal journey someone chooses for themselves. Okay, we're probably going to wrap this up here in a little bit. Rahul agrees with you. Love that, Mike. Now we're getting somewhere. If you hustle a lot, take on risk, and become elite, then rate of return is higher. At least now we are saying it's not the base case for the lazy investor. Yeah, so to be really clear, it's not easy, but there are things you can do to make it easier, if that makes sense. And then let's see if there's any more questions before we wrap this up for the night. I'm probably going to miss some here. RAS Stoners, that's how I got my deal. Motivated seller. Awesome. I should probably come over and do like a walkthrough at your new place. Daniel, hi Dion. I backed out of a deal during inspection last week when rates spiked. It made my deal not work anymore. I am now negotiating seller finance to get the cash on cash that works for me. My question is, what is a good balloon payment schedule? I feel like that is the riskiest part of seller finance. If I do 5-year balloon, is that long enough? I'm not sure entirely about the exit. So, great question. Here's my answer. Don't speak the words balloon payment into existence because they don't exist until you bring it up. Zuber has done 30-year fixed rate, 0% interest loan on a seller finance purchase. You are in control of all of the things that you can get the seller to agree to, right? You can offer different things. As soon as you say, well, do you want a 5 or a 10-year balloon payment? They're probably sitting back going, what the hell's a balloon payment? Oh, I can get the money all at once. Part of the reason for the seller finance is they don't want a lump sum. They want consistent payments without dealing with tenant, toilets, or termites, and they don't want a big capital gains hit. So a balloon payment is kind of a negative to the seller. Sometimes they want all the money, but another year, maybe after they retire and they don't have earned income to offset or to create more tax obligation. But I wouldn't do seller financing with a balloon payment. I wouldn't do it with an adjustable rate. I would say, what is the longest term that you can agree to fixed rate debt? Now, if you have a large portfolio, so I would say this for me, I would not want an adjustable rate mortgage. But if Matt, the lumberjack landlord, comes in with 137 rentals and tens of thousands of dollars a month in cash flow, and then has 1 or 2 properties on an adjustable rate mortgage to get a better rate now or a better down payment or whatever lending criteria that made it a better deal for him, because in 5 or 7 or 10 years, he can write the balloon payment check. Or if rates adjust, he could just write a check to pay it off and not be really impacted by it. Then the adjustable rate mortgage is not a risk. For me, with a smaller portfolio, it's too much of a risk. For seller financing, if possible, avoid a balloon payment. Like if the seller is asking for it, negotiate for longer, negotiate for smaller, whatever you can do. Look at your math and figure, can you pay the loan down enough to where the balloon payment can be smaller? My personal recommendation is I would never do a loan with a balloon payment because none of us know our financial situation 5 years from now. Any thoughts on balloon payments, Mike?
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with balloon payments. I think that it's a strategy that can be beneficial. As I mentioned earlier, my private money strategy that I used has a balloon payment on it. The way that I worked it was I tied the due date of that payment to the appraisal value of the house. I said, okay, I'm going to take out a private mortgage with a lender on this property. If it doesn't appraise for a minimum of 160,000, I get to extend my term by an additional 3 years. That allows me to not be forced into refinancing at an extremely high interest rate time where the market might be shaky, or if there was some sort of crash and prices fell. I also have no prepayment penalty. So for whatever reason, interest rates drop because we get into some crazy recession and interest rates drop back down into the 3s or 4s, I can refinance at that point and pay them off. So I think balloon payments are good. I don't like 3-year balloon payments. I don't even really like 5-year balloon payments, but 8 to 10 years, if there isn't an opportunity for you to find a good chance to refinance, or at least a level chance, like where you can transition debt to something else because of either appreciation or rates changing or something, I'd be very surprised. Just the rent growth over the next 8 to 10 years should be enough to cover a higher payment worst case. And then with my properties in Indiana, they're also cheap in the first place. The loans that I'm taking out on them are so cheap in the first place. Worst case scenario, I just pay for it cash. I mean, I don't want to do that. It's a lot harder to use that strategy if you're buying $600,000 properties because you probably don't have a $600,000 cash payment laying around. But no, balloon payments, it's skill, user specific. Like, how good are you? What do you have to balance it out? Like Dion said about the lumberjack with 137 units, he can handle these problems. He can take on a little bit higher level of risk mitigated by all of the successful rentals he already has, but probably not a first or second buy type deal. But maybe, depends.
There's a question from REI Stoners here, and my chat moved. I want to find it really quick. How do you know what your property will be worth after the renovation? So there's a couple things to think about there. You're looking for your after repair value. So the renovation could be to fix things that are deficient or to add things that add value, adds square footage, turn a den into a bedroom, those kind of things that increase the value of the property. If you're doing something like a BRRRR, financing is challenging because when you purchase, when REA Stories, you just closed on your duplex not too long ago, there was a seller saying, I want to sell it for this amount. And there was a buyer saying, I want to buy it for this amount. So there's a factual, actual event occurring where two people, two humans are saying, this is the price we agree on. So it's more common for an appraisal to come in at or close to that amount. After you buy a place and you're going to do the BRRRR, you do a rehab, rent it out. Now you're looking at, yes, they'll look at comps, right? But they don't look at current comps when you go to do the refinance. The lenders will look at comps from 6 months ago because currently there's not two people looking to sell and to buy a property. You don't have that factual, actual, tangible event going on where two people said, this is what we think it's worth, so the appraiser can agree to that. So it's much harder to get an appraisal close to an ARV if you're doing something like a cash out refinance. Refinances are different than purchase prices. Comps is the main thing with 4 units or less. When you stay in residential lending, they usually use comps like the last question that kind of came up down here that I'm going to talk about really quick about from Snap Temper. With 4 units or less, the property value is based on comps. With 5 units or more, they use the net operating income. So the amount of money coming in minus expenses, what's left is your net operating income. They take that. There's a way to calculate with your money coming in, purchase price to get your cap rate to show you can increase this by increasing rents or decreasing expenses. So ARV on multifamily is a very different animal than 4 units or less. You're in a duplex, so it's mostly based on comps. Your duplex is in an area where there are some single family houses around, so it's a little easier to get a better comp. If you're in a small multifamily unit surrounded by small multifamily, they usually appreciate a little bit slower than small multifamily in single family house area because they do go off of comps. Are you adding value? Right? Do you have a 2-bedroom that you're turning a den into a 3rd bedroom? Because now you're looking at a duplex with 3 bedrooms each side. That's different comps than what you have. So make sure you're using apple to apple comparison on what the comps are going to be when you're done. Anything else you do to figure out your ARV, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, really, it just comes down to how much experience you have in the market. That at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. You should know pretty definitively what something is worth. I know what 3-bed, 1-bath single family houses are worth. I know what 2-bed, 1-bath or 3-bed, 1-bath mirrored side duplexes are worth in my market, within a certain margin, but it's a very narrow margin. I know the low end and I know the high end, and I know specifically what's going to contribute to being on the low end or being on the high end. That all comes with time in the market, time looking at your market and buying rental properties and networking with a whole bunch of other people and seeing what they're doing with their remodels and things that they're purchasing. Because if I went off of just the units that I purchased out, they're great. I've purchased like 12. But when I go to my network of other investors, now I've got a network of 15 to 20 other investors who've collectively purchased around 200 rental properties in the area. And I have this huge swath of experience to pull from and say, hey, who's recently done a refinance on a 3-bed, 1-bath that they did a BRRRR project on? Okay, how did it go? What was your experience? And so once you get that basis of knowledge and you have that team, it's going to make it a lot easier to estimate. Sure, you can have a real estate agent pull comps. You can. And I absolutely would do that. I do that on all my stuff too, just to get a general base idea. But that's just to get you, that's to get you within 25%. If you want to get to within 5 to 10% of the actual number, the rest of that comes from experience.
There's a couple of comments here. Rob would have guessed that I was taller than you.
Oh, dude.
That's true. You're like the Jolly Green Giant.
Let me show it. Can you see this? Can people see this? I don't know if you can see it or not. No, dang it. I want people to be able to see.
That's me, the lumberjack, and you, right?
Yeah. Okay, but you see what's crazy here? It's all blurry, but I'm actually only 5'10". Matt's about 5'3", and Dion's 4'2".
Exactly. You'll see everybody in Vegas and they'll come over. It's gonna be me and Tyrion Lannister. We're gonna be right there.
Right.
No.
Right.
And then, like Tony says, this flask is just normal size, so it just gives you a little perspective. This fits in most people's pockets.
Right. Yeah.
John Williams makes a really good point here. Broke to millionaire was probably about 11 to 12 years for me, but it's still in the rat race. Most of my capital is locked behind 401k, so need more assets. Many millionaires, I want to say most, but I don't know the statistics, so I want to be clear. Many millionaires are millionaires because of their retirement accounts, which doesn't get us financial freedom because it's locked behind an age barrier. Which
And designed to be that way specifically to keep you in the rat race and keep you as an employee, because businesses need employees. If they had too many people figuring out how to retire at 35, like I'm going to bounce out of the market, that would not be good for the overall economy. And so the retirement systems are designed to keep you working until you're 65. And what do they always talk about? Let's figure out how to push that age back a little bit longer. And if you willingly push it back even further, we'll pay you more. Forget about the fact you're going to die sooner and never collect on it. I mean, it's a terrible system. It's a horrible system.
It's actually one of the things that me and Joe Kuhn disagree on. Like he invests in stocks, retired at 54. He's been retired for like 5 years now. He uses the bucket method, and I take a lot of his YouTube content and I learn from it. Like his retire to something, not from something, makes a ton of sense. His explanation of the go slow and no-go years for retirement make a lot of sense. But when it comes to Social Security, he logically does the math on what's the better return and blah, 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 and all that. And if you actually use just logic, he's right. He's 100% right. But it takes 11 years if you wait from 62 to 66 to take retirement from Social Security. It takes 11 years just to break even with the money you lost from not getting it at 62. So that means it's 67, and it's like 11.6, so 67.6. And life expectancy, right? It was 68 or 78, now it's 76. So you're past life expectancy to break even point if you didn't invest the extra money and get any kind of return on just the money. So that's one of the things we do kind of healthily disagree on. Snap temper. And this will be the last question that we wrap up with. I do want to point out, Janitor on Fire says something I did not know. Public service announcement, Joe Asamoah, who invests primarily in Section 8 in and around the Washington, D.C. area, very successfully. It does a live stream on Wednesdays. Didn't know that. So I like his content. Check it out. Snap temper. How concerned should I be about a cap rate on a multifamily that I'm going to house hack? So every now and then a question comes up like, should I have an LLC for every property? Or anything to do with marriage? And I have a reaction that says, okay, I don't do that. I don't have an LLC. There's a long list of reasons why I would never going to have an LLC. Here's my anti-marriage things. Here's my anti-college things. Here's my anti-retirement things. So whenever cap rate comes up, I don't have as strong a reaction as I do to the LLC thing. But I want to be really clear. Cap rate applies to multifamily, 5 units or more, where net operating income can tell you the value of your property, and small changes can have an impact. So somebody like Cody and Christian from Multifamily Strategies will look at cap rate and can make a decision on whether to do a deeper dive or not, because that doesn't tell you to buy the property or not. It says, is it worth looking at or not? What the cap rate is. But I'll tell you, in all honesty, 4 units or less, I couldn't even tell you how to calculate cap rate because it doesn't apply. It doesn't mean anything. It's not used in multifamily 4 units or less because comps are based on, your value is based on comps. If you're going to house hack, I'm making an assumption that means owner-occupied lending. You're going to live there, which means 4 units or less. You can house hack larger apartment complexes. That's entirely possible. So I'm just saying, statistically, it's more likely if you're going to house hack, you're talking 4 units or less. Cap rate means nothing. 1% rule means nothing. They do not apply to small multifamily. They don't apply to single family. They don't apply to house with ADU. They don't take into account things like, is there an HOA or no HOA? Is that $500 a month or $0 a month? Is your homeowner's insurance $1,000 a year, or in Florida, $8,000 a year? Is your property tax $2,000 a year in Washington, or $5,000 if you have a duplex, or is it $16,000 a year if you live in New Jersey, right? So that cap rate because it doesn't consider debt, doesn't apply to small multifamily. 1% rule doesn't apply to investing in real estate. It made a lot of sense in 2010 and 11 when there were millions of deals and you wanted to filter through to the few that you were, a few hundred you were going to look at. But now most of us don't even have a few hundred deals in our entire market to look at. So we don't need that filter system, and it doesn't take into account those expenses. So I hope that was a fair answer to your question, that you don't really use cap rate. What we're going to look at, most people start with math, right? As a determining factor to take a look or to disregard a property. What is the yield? Some people say, well, I want a certain cash flow per door. That doesn't tell me, because $100 per door is great if you got the property for free. $100 per door is terrible if you invested $10 billion to get the property. But how much did you invest? So cost to acquire. And then you take your annual profit. So how much are you going to make after all expenses and setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy? What's left is profit. Divide that year's profit by cost to acquire. It's going to give you a percentage. Do that on a lot of properties in your area. Learn your market to find out what the area average yield is, and then try to beat it. If it's 5% or 7%, you want to look for 8s. I was able to find 7s and 8s, so I shot for 10s. Lumberjack Landlord pointed this out really well in Michael Zuber's videos a couple months ago. For like a year or two, we were saying, learn your area average. This is based on one rental at a time's theory, and then look for a deal that's better than that so you get a great deal. And Matt pointed out really what it does is it protects you from getting a bad deal, right? So his intellect impacted that, and it made so much more sense now. You don't get a bad deal because you look for better than average. So you have to learn that math and how to find your yield. But that math is step one. First, you've already picked the market. You've picked the asset type you're looking for. So small multifamily, house with ADU, however you're going to house hack. And then you look at math to make sure that it's better than average for that area. But now you're going to look at, are there physical aspects of the property that are going to help limit tenant turnover? For me, that's 2 or more bedrooms and a garage. Washer dryer hookups in each unit. Side-by-side units are preferable to over-under. I only have one over-under. The rest are all side-by-sides. Good parking. All of those things that make it more likely for tenants to stay long-term, because tenant turnover is expensive for us. So we kind of go through this system of picking the right rental. Math is a step in that system, but it's not the entire thing. And hopefully you weren't offended by me saying, I understand cap rate can be important to some people, but it's not what I look at. Anything you'd like to wrap up with, Mike, before we're done for the evening?
2 things. Number one, great synopsis on cap rate. Absolutely 100% correct. Doesn't make any difference on anything under 5 units. It's a common mistake that a lot of the reventure consulting types make. They start talking about cap rate because they don't actually invest in real estate, so they don't know what they're talking about. And cap rate is something that applies on 5 units or more commercial real estate, not on 4 units or less. And they expose themselves for being amateurs when they do it. But somebody made the question that someone else had left a great question earlier. Eric, I'll read that question since it's right here. He says, looking forward to meeting you guys in Vegas. Thanks, Eric. Looking forward to meeting you there too. He says, looking forward to meeting you guys in Vegas. I'm closing in on 200 units, but we're chasing rent more and more than we have before, thinking of pausing and stacking cash for a possible recession. Dion, what are your thoughts?
So thanks for that. I was scrolling up to find the Eric thing. There's also one other question I want to do before we wrap up, I think. Rob asked me, what's the site for base housing allowance? I'll have to put that up here. I think I have it saved. But Eric, I'm looking forward to meeting you in Vegas too. If you're going to close on 200 units, this is something I'll take from Mark Oshiro, the financial firefighter who invests in Hawaii, who took all of the money out of his retirement accounts, or I don't know if it was all, so I'll say it as much as I know. He took money out of his retirement accounts and then purchased, I think, 14 rentals in 2 years. We did a couple of videos together. I watch his stuff too. And he has said a couple of times, I kind of think I should have went slower because I had some evictions and some tenant turnovers and some, not a rehab, but like the tenant turnover fixing going on all at the same time. And it was kind of a challenge to take that on all at once really quick. I don't know about pausing and stacking cash for a recession, because 4 out of the last 6 recessions, home prices went up. So it's not like you're going to find a better deal. But if you're stacking cash for possible rent delinquencies, added costs, things, handyman materials costing more. Yes, if your reserves aren't where you're comfortable, I believe in stacking reserves for that. What we think is happening with the market doesn't tell us if we should invest in a hurry or if we should wait. Like anybody telling you to hurry or somebody telling you to wait, I'd block them. Either one of those I think is wrong. There's two things that tell us when to buy. The first is, and this is where I think is going to relate to you in this situation. The first thing is, are you ready? That means, are you educated? Do you know your market? Do you have the reserves for your current portfolio and the ones that you're looking to buy? So if you don't, you want to stack cash till you do. That's how it applies to you. Do you have the bandwidth to handle an added rental now, which means you're ready means you're not going through a divorce, death in the family, birth in the family, change in occupations, forced change in occupations, all of these things that can take away our mental focus to where we might not make the best decisions with investing. So are you ready isn't just, do you have a down payment? It's, are you physically and mentally ready to buy the next property, including the reserves and the money for make ready on that purchase? If you're not, yeah, you stack cash. It has nothing to do with if there's a recession coming or if we're in one or if we're coming out of one. The second thing is, did you find a deal that's amazing? That's great. That's a good solid base hit. It doesn't have to be a home run, but a good base hit, right? Because you don't get RBIs unless you get on base. There's my sports ball moment for Matt, since he's here saying that we're still going. But you're ready and you found a deal. If you pause to stack cash, that sounds like you're not looking every day for those deals, so you're probably going to miss them. But if you are ready and you look every day, you're not in a hurry and you're not waiting for something to change in the market, then you'll find the deal at the right time, make an offer when it's the right deal, and have the reserves and have the cash for it. But you won't do it if you pause and then try to come back into the market in 6 months or a year. So yes, stack cash if you don't have the reserves for it, but don't pause because you're expecting a recession. And yes, Rob, Mike has booked people in the Airbnb.
Under 2 days, I got 2 bookings. So yeah, it's going well so far.
Duplex Dave trying to fill one of them. This was the last question. Duplex Dave fills one of my single family houses with Section 8 tenants. Since the fair market rent is much higher than the current going rates for my non-Section 8, any tips on how to find and successfully fill this Section 8 with Section 8 tenant? So first, get it approved through the agency. In most counties, it's called the actual housing authority for that county. Some counties, it's run by a nonprofit, so you might have to do a little research to find out who runs the voucher program for your county. Go in educated, find comps with your rental, expressing what you're going to be expecting to rent the place for. Show them the fair market rent, because not all places will pay that amount. Some will pay the variance over if there's a shortage. Some will pay less if they have enough units, which is rare, but it's possible. Once the unit is approved, get a hold of the counselors. This is how I find my Section 8 tenants. So my goal is to diversify my properties. I talked about 2 ways. The first way is keeping them 10 miles apart near several economic drivers. But the second way is I diversify my tenant base. I want 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, 1/3 working or retired. I have one of my units that I like to keep a military tenant in because it's very close to the base. Perfect fit for me with the amount of BH that they get. So what I'll do is I'll call the base housing people here for JVLM and I'll say, hey, here's the link. Can you put this out on your post? So if I wanted a Section 8 tenant in a unit, I would do something very similar. Get a hold of the counselor, have your link set up, and take that link and send it to the counselors and say, can you share this with your clients looking for this number of bedrooms? Because they usually have people renting. They have a voucher for a 3 or a 4 or a 2-bedroom voucher, but they can only find a 1, 2, or a 3-bedroom place that's smaller than what they qualify for, that they're renting, waiting for your place to open that they can actually use their voucher for. Or there's a backlog of people just waiting for a place to open. And you say, can you share this link with your customers looking for a place? That's how I found my last couple of Section 8 tenants, because the counselor reaches out to them. You can't run an ad that says military only, Section 8 only, or I won't take military or Section 8, right? You're going to be hit by a discrimination suit. But if you control where you advertise, that's how you find your tenants from those different sources. And with that, we're probably going to wrap up for the week. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us, Mike. Thank you all. Have a week full of awesome. Until my next video. Thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry. The number you're trying to reach has been disconnected.
Always